Buenas noches, bienvenidos. El siguiente mensaje será repetido en español enseguida. I would like to provide a brief overview of tonight's meeting. After a few procedural items, the board will hear approximately 30 minutes. We'll hear 30 minutes of public comment. At the end of the meeting, there will be another and final opportunity for additional public comments. So if you do not get to speak at the beginning of the meeting, we encourage you to stay at the end. To request to participate in public comment, please raise your hand now by clicking on the participants button at the bottom of your screen and selecting the raise your hand button. To comment by phone, you will be prompted to raise your hand by pressing *9. If you want to raise your hand, if you wait to raise your hand until the public comment period starts, you will not get to speak and you will have to wait until the second public comment period. When called upon, you will be promoted to a panelist, which means that you will appear on screen. If you do not want to appear on camera, please be sure to disable your camera on your end. The board president will usually call our students first. So if you are a student who wishes to speak tonight, please indicate so by writing student at the end of your name. The board president will determine whether to set tonight's speaking time at 1, 2, or 3 minutes per speaker, and on an individual basis has the discretion to allow for extra time for those who need translation or have other speech needs. When your time has elapsed, you will see Vice President Brown holding a sign letting you know you have 15 seconds left. If you are still speaking, please finish your sentence, but try not to speak beyond your time. Thank you. Enseguida proporcionaré un resumen detallando el orden de esta reunión. Después de unos procedimientos preliminares, un periodo de media hora será dedicado a comentarios de parte del público. Al final de la junta habrá una segunda y última oportunidad para proveer comentario público y quienes no pudieron hacerlo durante la primera llamada, lo pueden hacer entonces. Para comentar por videoconferencia, haga clic en el botón participantes en la parte de abajo de la pantalla y seleccione el botón levantar la mano. Para participar por medio de teléfono, por favor de levantar la mano presionando estrella 9. Al ser llamado o llamada, aparecerá en cámaras, o si no desea aparecer en cámara, por favor de apagar su cámara. El presidente otorgará 1, 2 o 3 minutos dependiendo del tiempo que haya disponible. Y la vicepresidenta Khadija Brown le levantará un sign indicando cuando tiene 15 segundos. Si todavía está hablando, por favor de terminar su oración, pero trate de no sobrepasarse su tiempo. Muchas gracias. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chires. I'm going to welcome everybody to the June 9th meeting of the Berkeley School Board. Thank you for being here. We have a smaller crowd tonight, but we're thrilled that everybody is here. For the record, we opened the meeting at 5 o'clock and recessed to closed session and called the open session of the meeting to order at 7 o'clock. Ms. Harris, can you please call the roll? I know
Director Vasudev.
Presente.
Director Babbitt.
Here.
Director Julie Sinai.
Here.
Vice President Khadija Brown.
She's coming.
Okay, and President Tile.
Present. Thank you. Okay. Now we need to approve the meeting agenda. Are there any proposed changes to the meeting agenda? Can I have a motion?
I'll move to approve the agenda for today's meeting.
Thank you. Motion by Director Babbitt. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Director Vasudev. Ms. Chires?
Director Vasudev.
Yes.
Director Babbitt.
Yes.
Director Sinai.
Yes.
Vice President Brown, is she in yet?
Not yet. Oh, there she is.
And President Alford.
Yes, and yes. Vice President Brown, did you vote to approve the agenda?
Yes.
Thank you.
Noted.
Welcome. Now we're going to have a Ms. Chires, are you promoting? Where are you, Ms. Chires? Are you promoting the students?
Yes, they'll be
Okay.
coming right up.
Okay. We're going to have a presentation in a minute. If this is the time to raise your hand, if you'd like to give public comment, so we can see how many people have raised your hand. So we're going to do public comment in a few minutes, but now is the time to raise your hand if you would like to give public comment. The first, before we get to public comment though, tonight we have two presentations. The first is a presentation from 3 of our students with an update on the Vote 16 initiative to allow 16 and 17-year-olds to vote in the school board elections. Ms. Chires, I'm just stalling, and there they are. Ms. Love, and I believe we have 2 other students, right? Ms. Merman and Ms. Walker. Sylvia, are you starting?
Yes.
Okay, let's make sure that, or
Yeah. If we just wait 1 second to make
okay,
sure. Sorry.
sure. Just for the board's benefit, this is just a presentation. I mean, not just a presentation, but is a presentation where, and if there's questions or comments, you can direct them to the superintendent afterwards. But we're really thrilled to have 3 students who've been leading this initiative with us tonight, and we're excited to hear from them. So I'll turn it over to you, the 3 of you, and to introduce yourselves and start the presentation.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Sylvie Love.
I'm Arev Walker.
And I'm Adrienne Merman, and we were all leaders of Berkeley Vote 16 this past year, and we're here to give an update on our organization and the progress of Measure Y1, because we are graduating and passing the organization on to new student leaders for next year.
In 2016, the voters of Berkeley understood why allowing 16 and 17-year-olds to vote in school board elections was important. They saw the lack of representation of student voices in the decisions that affected them. They understood that voting while in high school would create lifelong voting habits. And when over 70% of them cast their ballots in favor of Measure Y1 to lower the voting age in school board elections, they expected the measure to be implemented. 5 years of hard work on the part of student leaders, school board members, and lawyers have passed, but 16 and 17-year-olds still have never voted in a school board election.
The COVID-19 pandemic has brought many unexpected challenges for the school board and for everyone working on Vote 16 implementation, understandably slowing down the process as energy was redirected to student safety and online learning. As vaccines increase and students return to campus, we are excited about reigniting the community's interest and enthusiasm in the implementation of Measure Y1. Berkeley students have always been outspoken and engaged, and this past year has revealed how important it is that the school board hears the voices of the students it serves.
Right now, BUSD lawyer Margaret Prinzing and the Alameda County Registrar of Voters are working with Runbeck, which is the election services company for California, to make tech changes to allow youth voting on their voting machines. This includes altering the current system to allow machines to process multiple different ballots and recognize birth dates less than 18 years ago. One major change that Measure Y1 would make to Berkeley elections would be to add a new ballot for 16 and 17-year-olds to vote solely for school board directors. The Registrar of Voters and Runbeck have also met with the California Secretary of State's office to begin collaboration on the implementation process. These meetings have brought up a lot of unknowns, such as the legality of disclosing names of minors who are voting, but future meetings have been planned to address these issues.
Meanwhile, in November 2020, Oakland passed Measure QQ, which also lowers the voting age for school board elections. We're optimistic that this development will mean increased collaboration with Oakland organizers and more success in working with the Alameda County Registrar of Voters.
Berkeley and Oakland are planning to use the pre-registration system already in place to determine who is eligible to vote when Y1 and QQ are implemented. This means that Vote 16's efforts to pre-register Berkeley High students will be increasingly vital to ensure that 16 and 17-year-olds are able to access their right to vote.
Our current goal is to implement Measure Y1 by November of 2022, and the Registrar of Voters is committed to working with us towards that goal. Looking ahead, we would like the school board to continue to work with the Registrar of Voters and Secretary of State to determine whether it is technologically feasible to implement Measure Y1 in Berkeley and Alameda County. Once it is ruled as technologically feasible, the City Council can pass an ordinance to authorize youth voting.
In addition to working on the implementation of Measure Y1, we have recruited an enthusiastic group of high school students working to increase youth civic engagement through various projects. For the November 2020 election, we worked to create a comprehensive voter guide geared towards youth voting. We made sure it was simple to follow, factually accurate, and gave a good overview of every measure and candidate on the ballot in Berkeley, Alameda County, and California. We distributed this guide to the community virtually and plan to create similar guides in the future. This spring, unable to hold our normal in-class voter registration drives, we created a video explaining how to register to vote online. This video included clips of influential Bay Area figures such as Andy Samberg, Berkeley City Council member Rigel Robinson, and various Berkeley High teachers. This video reached hundreds of students and community members.
Berkeley was the first city in the Western United States to support the idea that youth are capable and deserving of a voice in our local politics. When Measure Y1 is implemented, the city of Berkeley will have expanded voting rights and opened a new chapter of our city's history. We envision school board candidate forums in the Berkeley High Auditorium, how to vote presentations and classes, a Berkeley High School polling place run by students on campus, and a new generation of even more engaged and empowered Berkeley High youth. We are so grateful to Berkeley voters, the Berkeley community, and the BUSD School Board for their continued support of our efforts to implement Measure Y1, and we can't wait to watch the progress unfold over the coming months and years.
If you have any questions, you can reach out to us at vote16berk@gmail.com, which we'll also put in the chat. And thank you guys so much for letting us share with you all.
Thank you all so much, and congratulations on your graduation. And thank you not only for the presentation, but for your persistence in following through with this incredible bureaucratic process that that will hopefully conclude, as you said, with the ability to vote for 16 and 17-year-olds in November 2022. But your leadership is really appreciated, and it's inspiring. And thank you for being here. Thank you, and congratulations again on graduation. All right, now I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Stevens, to introduce the recognition that we're about to do.
Yeah, thank you very much, President Alper. I'm going to turn this over to a teacher on special assignment who works with Berkeley Unified School District. Her name is Gloria Munoz. Gloria, welcome to you. We're really happy to have you here. And could you help members of the public know what we're celebrating tonight?
Sure, thank you. I've prepared a little something to give an overview of tonight's presentation. Mi nombre es Gloria Muñoz y soy la maestra del Distrito de Asignación Especial de Apoyo del Desarrollo del idioma inglés, kinder transicional hasta el grado 12º. Es un gran placer presentarles 210 estudiantes eruditos que nos gustaría reconocer esta noche. Esta noche celebramos dos grupos de estudiantes, 103 estudiantes que recibieron el sello estatal de alfabetización bilingüe y 107 estudiantes que recibieron el reconocimiento de reclasificación este año. Como el año pasado, esta noche reunimos a nuestros grupos para celebrar el bilingüismo. Ambos grupos de estudiantes eruditos han cumplido criterios estatales rigurosos para mostrar el éxito académico en 2 idiomas, en unos casos más de 2. Nosotros como distrito vemos esta meta como un gran logro y nos sentimos honrados de haber apoyado este logro de alguna manera. Es importante también reconocer a las familias y guardianes que no solo animaron a nuestros estudiantes eruditos en cada paso del camino, sino que valoraron la importancia a criar niños, niñas o niñez bilingües. Esta noche honramos a nuestros estudiantes por mantener su compromiso, no solo de ser destacados académicos, sino también ser destacados académicos bilingües. And what I've shared is that my name is Gloria Munoz. I am the district teacher on special assignment that supports English language development TK through 12th grade. It is my great pleasure to present to you tonight 210 student scholars that we would like to recognize. Tonight, we would like to celebrate two groups of students, 103 State Seal of Biliteracy recipients and 107 students receiving reclassification recognition this year. As we did last year, tonight we're bringing our groups together to celebrate bilingualism. Both groups of student scholars have met rigorous state criteria in order to display academic success in 2 languages, and in some cases, more than 2. We as a district see this as a great achievement, and we're humbled to have supported this journey in some small way. It is important to also recognize the families and caregivers that not only cheered our student scholars every step of the way, but valued the importance of nurturing bilingual children. Tonight, we honor our students for maintaining their commitment to not only be outstanding scholars, but outstanding bilingual scholars. And if you'll allow me to share my screen, I would like to share with you a short presentation that captures all of the students' names and gives them a moment of recognition. If that concludes our presentation and our student recognition, congratulations to all the families and the students. Felicidades a todos los estudiantes y las familias. And thank you for allowing me to be a part of that celebration.
Ms. Munoz, thank you so much. And I'd love to acknowledge your work as well. I know that for you, this is such an area of interest and love. And so thank you for all of the dedication that you've showed over many years to support our English language learners across all of our schools.
Thank you so much. All right, we're going to give people 2 minutes tonight for public speaking. I'm about to ask Vice President Brown to report back from closed session. But before she does that, I just want to let anybody who wants to speak in public comment to raise your hand now. Once we start public comment, if you raise your hand, you can speak at the end of the meeting. Please adjust your comments to be 2 minutes long, and Vice President Brown will keep the time when we get to that. But Vice President Brown, can I ask you to please report from closed session?
Absolutely. For closed session, all school board directors were present. For item 3.1, the board discussed and provided direction. And that is the very short update from closed session.
All right, but well done. All right, now we will move to public comment. So again, Vice President Brown is going to keep the time 2 minutes each. And we will start with Paz Melendez-Canales, followed by Deborah Nelson.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead, Paz.
Okay. Good evening to everyone. My name is Paz Melendez-Canales, and I have kids at Longfellow and Berkeley High. I'm also part of Latinos Unidos, and I'm here tonight in support of the following. Latinos Unidos de Berkeley would like to see the following items prioritized in the funding decisions. For example, fully funding English language development teachers at each site and include coaching and collaboration time with classroom teachers. We want a fully funded ELL master plan with the support from CAVE. If your new LCAP goal is to provide high quality classroom instruction and curriculum that promotes college and career readiness and racial predictability and ensures that all systems are culturally and linguistically responsive to student needs, then show us that you are serious about closing the opportunity gaps that have persisted for too long for our ELL students. As you may know, our ELL students face significant gaps in college readiness, math performance, and classification rates. We need to ensure that we are supporting our ELL families with a comprehensive and fully funded ELL master plan. We are also asking that you fund a full-time OFI bilingual office specialist dedicated to district-wide support for parent engagement and leadership development. This need has been expressed in various meetings now by LAV and DLAC. Our district population of Latinx students is 22%, and even if students speak English, many of their parents do not. By the way, this data came from the data book given to DLAC in the fall of 2020. At the last board meeting, Director Babbitt mentioned that only 6% of families needed services in Spanish. I would like to know where that number came from and respectfully ask that in the future, anyone making comments at board meetings also mention where you are quoting the data from in case anyone wants to follow up on it. We would also like to ask that the district fully fund an OFI specialist at each school site from preschools to high school and include BTEC. Regarding LCAP funds, we want to see funds spent on supplementing services for ELL students and not supplanting. This means, for example, that funding for ELD teachers needs to come out of the general fund as baseline and supplement with LCAP funds to offer a sustainable model and program that serves the needs of our students.
Thank you so much, Ms. Melendez-Canales. Thank you. Next, we have Deborah Nelson, followed by Rudy Chipolon.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, I'm Deborah. I'm a parent at Berkeley High. I want to thank Principal Raygosa and Superintendent Stevens for their decision to pause consideration of the block schedule for Berkeley High. I think this was the right call, especially since there would have been so little time to plan. Principal Raygosa's message today suggested that the block schedule may be considered for next year, 22-23. If so, I have a few suggestions. Number one, any consideration should be informed by data. We know that block schedules sometimes work and sometimes don't. We should study other schools and other districts where it's worked, where it hasn't. What are the factors that lead to success or failure? Is this the right system for Berkeley High? What is the problem that we're trying to solve, and how do we determine if this is the right solution? Number two, I would urge you to come up with a plan that does not cut 22 hours of instruction per class per year. Flex time might be the best thing since sliced bread, but how are teachers supposed to make up 22 hours of lost instructional time with their students? Number three, all teachers should be included in the decision-making process. I understand that a few teacher reps were involved over the last few weeks, but my student heard from several of her teachers that her teachers had serious concerns about the block schedule and didn't support it. Number four, serious thought needs to be given to how to support teachers to re-engineer their lesson plans. 100-minute classes a couple of days a week are very different from 50-minute classes every day. And without a lot of training and support, we'll be setting up our teachers for failure. In closing, we know that U9 took 2.5 years to plan. Shifting to a block schedule would be an enormous undertaking with huge implications. If we do go down this road, we must be informed by data, we must seek feedback from all stakeholders, and we must spend the time and money necessary to ensure that teachers can be successful.
Thank you, Ms. Nelson. Thank you so much. Next, we have Rudy Cipollone, followed by Sarah Bowles.
Good evening. This is Val Cipollone. I am a BHS parent. I would like to commend the young women for the Y1 presentation and thank them for their effort. That was truly amazing. And also offer my congratulations to the bilingual scholars and their families. Like Deborah Nelson, I am relieved that the proposed block schedule for BHS has been set aside for now and urge you to keep it on the sidelines until it can be planned for and funded appropriately. A large public high school like BHS typically would prepare for such an experiment in block scheduling over a multi-year period involving detailed discussions with shareholders, including teacher leaders, students, parents, and administrators. Teachers would be given the support they need to reimagine their curriculum and the training they need to guarantee the program's success. Revisiting the block schedule at all during the 2021-22 school year, when all resources should be focused on ensuring a successful return for the BHS community, is as misguided and irresponsible as it was for BHS to have spent precious time this spring on such a plan, when time could have been spent on making April's return to campus more meaningful and the fall as seamless as possible. I urge the board and BHS leaders to focus on stability, predictability, and recovery during the entire 2021-22 school year. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Cipollone. And next we have Sarah Bowles, followed by Councilmember Terry Taplin. Ms. Bowles, are you there?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay, great. So I'm a parent of kids with IEPs, and I wanted to express my concerns about the caseload assessment and class size caps for special education in the proposed BFT contract. So caseload and assessment for special ed were not mentioned in the initial sunshine documents, nor are they mentioned in any update to the board. And as the tentative agreement is dated May 26, it doesn't appear the obligation for timely public disclosure of new terms within 24 hours under the ROTA Act has been met. So I want the board to be mindful of that in meeting the public's right to know. So before approving this contract, I need the board to inquire about the impact of caps on kids with IEPs actually getting the assessment and ultimately the support services they need in a timely fashion. What adequate staffing would need to be to address kids' needs under these new caps, and if we will in fact be adequately staffed. So if not, how many new staff would need to be hired in order to meet our obligation to kids? And if there's a significant gap between staffing and student needs, what's the financial trade-off going to be between just hiring the staff we need and the probable legal expenses you'll expend on parents who probably end up suing you because we continue the delays that have plagued the district over the past couple of years. So I'm hoping we can have a informative public, discussion about how you're, kind of repairing special ed. And more generally, I'm curious why, given the recruitment challenges for special education staff, why we're not offering stipends or bonuses for special ed staff in the same way that we are for Spanish language teachers that we're trying to recruit.
Thank you, Ms. Bowles. Next, we have Councilmember Taplin, followed by Aliska Herrera de Salvatierra.
you, President Alper, and good evening. Happy budget. My capacity as an individual and BUSD alum, speaking in support of funding key positions and work that support multilingual learners and their families. As a member of the African American community and public servant, it's important that our public institutions reflect the cultural, ethnic, and linguistic diversity of our city. As a monolingual English speaker, I've never had to worry about accessing spaces where my home language isn't spoken. However, this is not the case for everyone in Berkeley. I saw this firsthand while serving as an instructional assistant at Berkeley City College. I commend the board for passing the Latinx resolution and believe that funding these positions will be essential in the resolution's implementation. I support a well-funded English language learner master plan to help close the opportunity gaps for English language learners in Berkeley. I also support the funding of an Office of Family Engagement Equity Specialist who can work with Spanish-speaking families in BUSD. Thank you very much. Go Jackets.
Thank you so much, Councilmember. Next, we have Aliska Herrera de Salvatierra, followed by Angela Gallegos Castillo.
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Hello, good evening. My name is Aliska Herrera. I have a third grader at Sylvia Mendez, and I'm also one of the DLAG rep of the school. I want to express my gratitude and strong support for the Latinx resolution because there's been an urgent need to excel the academic performance of English learners in the last years. The master plan had not been revised in 8 years, the low math performance of our students, the low reclassification rates, and the increase in the achievement gap of Latinx students in relation to other groups are symptoms that show that the educational plan was not elevating our students. So with this resolution as parent, we have hope and we expect the district to take the necessary actions to make the LCAP and the Latinx resolution goals a reality. For this purpose, it is imperative to fully fund ELD and RTI math teachers at Sylvia Mendez and any other school that requested to fully fund the English learners master plan with the support from CABE to make it the best plan and for the students and to strengthen parent engagement with fully bilingual OFI positions at each site. So please take in mind that the learning loss that as a result of the pandemic just have increased the educational needs our students had. And now than ever, it is the time to fully support at long term our English learners to avoid that any unexpected problem in the future can put at risk the academic performance of our students. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the resolution and please take the commitment ongoing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for being here. Next, we have Angela Gallegos Castillo, followed by Martin de Mucha Flores, who will be our last public speaker.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. Go ahead.
Good evening, Board of Directors, Superintendent Brent Stevens. This is Angela Gallegos Castillo, parent of a current sophomore at Berkeley High School, a daughter who graduated through the system, and a Berkeley resident. On behalf of Latinos Unidos de Berkeley, I'm here to also advocate for the needs of our Spanish-speaking families as well as other families as well. Big picture point, I encourage the board to make decisions that move us away from patchwork and reactionary decisions to long-term sustainability. One great way to do that is to support the OFI district level liaison that not only can work with the school sites, but can work with the central office and the district leadership to ensure that the infrastructure is there for the needs of all our families, but specifically that can help with the TWI infrastructure that I know that the current principals have been working on. Both Veronica and Paco have been trying to bolster the infrastructure of the TWI program. They would also be able to help with the outreach and the marketing and the education to parents to let them know that they have a TWI program to register their children in. There needs to be an educational element to getting more families involved in the TWI program. 11% of our Spanish-speaking families speak Spanish at home. Our Latino families speak Spanish at home. So I urge the district and the school board to continue supporting multilingual learners, ELD coaches and teachers at each school, because we know that they're needing it at each school. And I definitely want to also support the investment and expansion of ethnic studies. We know how important identity formation is.
Oh. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, our last speaker will be Martin de Mucha Flores. No, I think you muted yourself.
And totally, bingo on the mute card. Thank you. Buenas tardes. Martin de Mucha Flores, parent of Soledad, sophomore now at Berkeley Independent Studies, and then Martin Severo, fourth grader now at Sylvia Mendez. My comments more about, I wanted to express my gratitude and appreciation to the board. 2021 has been amazing for you all to both do the African American Success Framework and commit to the Latinx resolution. Like, that's a huge lift in California that not a lot of districts and people are being committed to. Now the next part becomes funding these priorities with budgets, right? And I just want to name that the Office of Family Engagement and Equity, the name equity is in that name. And we need people and the staffing to support that. And so I'm calling, like with my other colleagues, community, family members, to really ask for that support, right? Invest in those places because it matters. I also wanted to just share some data from EdGov that was pulled, that when we see a trend in both our African American and Latinx community as a decrease in enrollment over the last 4 years. And these roles are key to being connected with families and engage with families. And so it just becomes another resource to be considered. And the other thing that just, again, as a high level context is that, our educational systems have structural inequities in our fabric, right? And we constantly try to do these things of reform. And the work that you all are doing is transformative. And so it's going to be hard, it's going to be difficult. But if we continue to work in this lens of solidarity and in terms of the way that we got these resolutions through and fund the priorities that focus on these groups, I'm confident that BUSD is going to continue to show up for most marginalized students. And these trends that we see in decreasing enrollments, particularly amongst our Black and Latinx students, will stop and hopefully reverse, because we're investing in where it matters, in engagement and in equity, and showing up in a culture responsive way, both linguistically and for the people in our community. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. All right, next we'll turn to our union comments. I believe Ms. Chires, I think if there's any union leadership here to speak, this would be the time to raise your hand. All right, I see President Frank Hernandez from our Berkeley Council of Classified Employees. So why don't we go to Mr. Hernandez, and then we have a video from our Berkeley Federation of Teachers president.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. Go ahead, Mr. Hernandez. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, school board members and Superintendent Stevens. Berkeley Unified School District has rightfully prided itself on its commitment to racial and economic justice for our students and their families. As you know, many of our classified staff are also low-income families of color. We too have been impacted by COVID, and some of us in our families and households, and some by job losses of partners or by eviction. Some classified staff has struggled to make rent, has struggled to pay bills, and has struggled to put food on the table. That's why we have been advocating for the school reopening stipend for classified staff who have been on the front lines every day, ensuring that our campuses are clean and safe, that our buses are running, and our students and their families don't go hungry. We are proud of that work. And we are happy that the district is working with us to negotiate a fair school reopening stipend for classified staff. This money will go a long way for each and every one of our members who stepped up, showed up, and ensured that our schools could open. In the coming days, we look forward to ratifying this agreement and moving forward in negotiating our contract. Please remember the commitment we have made to our school community during this difficult year. We also hope that you keep in mind the district commitment to racial and economic justice, which needs to include our classified employees. Thank you for your time. We look forward to continuing to work with the district to reach a fair contract in the coming months. Thank you.
Thank you, President Hernandez. Ms. Chavez, let's go to Berkeley Federation of Teachers President Matt Meyer.
Hello, Dr. Stevens and the Berkeley Unified School Board. I am happy to report that our membership overwhelmingly ratified our tentative agreement for the 2021-2022 school year. We appreciate the board listening to our teacher testimonials about the work that we are passionate about and know that with your support, we can start off this next year with a great focus on teaching. There are many priorities for the district, and BFT have been resolved by this agreement.
Ms. Chavez, can you make it louder?
Structure for advisory at the middle school level. This will allow sites to plan for the upcoming school year and create an advisory program specific to their school, and there will be curriculum developed for this time. We know our students will need all kinds of support that may fall outside of the traditional academic classes. Healthcare costs have been increasing steadily over the last 20 years. Unlike some neighboring districts, the USD and employees share the cost of health benefits, which gets very expensive as family members are added. This new contract splits any healthcare increase 50-50, which we believe is a fair way to cover an unknown increase. We all must fight for universal healthcare, as it is the only real way to resolve this issue. But in the meantime, sharing increases is a fair approach, and we are glad the district agrees. For many years, we have heard from our bilingual educators that being fluent in 2 languages allows them to be better teachers. They can communicate with families and students in ways that English-only teachers cannot. They also can make sure that families receive important information and directions in their home languages. This also means that our bilingual teachers and support providers have more work and are often leaned on to be these communicators. Our district could not operate without them, and the stipend we agreed on is an important financial recognition of the extra work these teachers do. There has been discussion about BFT's compensation package. I would like to provide some context. BFT and the district have agreed to a 1% raise and a 3.5% bonus. Only the raise is coming out of ongoing dollars. This is a relatively small raise considering the current inflation rate and the unprecedented new ongoing dollars coming from the state. Bonuses come from one-time dollars, which have many sources, including unspent end-of-year balances. Bonuses are not a new concept, and our members often accept a combination of raise and bonus in any given year. It is common for a district to offer a larger bonus instead of a larger raise because it is much cheaper for the district in the long run. A bonus does not completely replace a raise, does not get built into the salary schedule, does not make us more competitive for hiring, and it disappears after 1 year. Our ability to hire qualified teachers is directly related to how much we are willing to pay them, especially compared to neighboring districts. I just found out last week that we lost out on 2 African-American veteran teachers because our compensation and healthcare coverage would mean they would take a pay cut to come to our district. One works in Oakland, where employee healthcare is completely covered. The other in Newark, which offers much higher salaries. If we are serious about hiring teachers of color in our district, we must continue to offer salary increases that make it affordable to work in our district. Qualified teachers provide the most direct services to students, their daily education. We are proud of this contract as it balances many needs. Both the district and the union worked hard on a tight schedule to make it happen before our current contract expired. With this behind us, our teachers are already preparing for the upcoming year and working over the summer to make sure our classrooms and curriculum is ready for the students in August. They will need to be lots of extra work to make sure our students are fully supported as they transition back to campus. Thank you.
Thank you, President Meyer. Now we will move to committee comments. I know we have a comment from the Parent Advisory Committee. Ms. Chavez, it's Berkeley High School PTSA is Mimi Pulich, I believe. Yeah, there she is. And the committees have 5 minutes also. Ms. Pulich?
You might be on mute still.
Ms. Pulich, are you muted?
You know, she's actually listed in the audience twice. I wonder if she has a phone and a computer. Up there it is.
I just tried the second name.
Hello, this is Sandra.
Oh, hi, Sandra.
How are you guys doing? Hey, Mimi's actually going to be making the comment today.
Wait, is she? What?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, there she is. There she goes. Okay.
Okay. All right. Sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, I shall begin.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, this is Mimi Pulich. It's my last year in BUSD serving on the PAC, and I'm delivering the comments tonight. This year, as has been the case with the PAC every year, dedicated parent and guardian volunteers have gathered monthly with the intent to learn about BUSD programs and student outcomes. Unlike other committees, the PAC's focus is on the academic success and emotional well-being of Berkeley's prioritized students. Every year, the PAC has provided comments to help BUSD better serve all of its students, but especially the traditionally underserved prioritized students, as they are the ones who most need the PAC's advocacy at the district level. The PAC comments delivered in the past 4 board meetings are the culmination of this commitment. Everyone knows that this has been a year unlike any other, so it goes without saying that this year's PAC has been unlike any other. By the end of our March meeting, new members only knew about a handful of the supplementally funded programs that the PAC has focused on for the past 5 years. And much of the information about them came from fellow PAC members' involvement in their schools. Our January, April, and May meetings were consumed with wide-ranging budget overviews that raised more questions than answers. At the tail end of our May meeting, the PAC and DLAC were given a link to a draft of the new 3-year LCAP plan. The next day, we received a survey link for us to provide comments on programs in the new plan. Many of these programs were never discussed in this year or in any past year, and the bridge was omitted. Tonight, June 9th, we cannot give you detailed feedback on the new LCAP plan other than to say that it does not exhibit any new or compelling strategies to elevate math and literacy proficiency, and many of the changes in it amount to new funding sources for the same programs and services that have yet to improve student outcomes. How adding COVID relief funds to our budget will make a tangible difference is unclear. And in summary, thus far, we have not seen any clear paths to better serve our prioritized students. But again, this has been a different year, unlike any other. Whereas past PACs have submitted comments on numerous programs and budget proposals, this year's comments are limited to 4 top priority program areas, which we presented at the last board meetings. Given the pandemic incurred looming learning losses ahead, the PAC urges the superintendent and the board to recognize these areas as more critical now than ever before and invest appropriately as follows. Scale up the Office of Family Engagement and Equity and Berkeley High's Bridge program. Operating for years now with bare bone resources, OFI and Bridge have consistently achieved outcomes that positively transform the experiences of prioritized students and their families. Now is the time to build on their success and equip them to do more. At a bare minimum, every school needs its own OFI specialist. The PAC has been saying this for years, and Bridge needs to be sufficiently staffed to serve its current cohorts, and additional funding can put 25 more ninth graders on a promising path to a college education. Retool math instruction. For years, BUSD has been in a math crisis. Now, pandemic learning losses are almost certain to result in further plummets. We can't keep doing the same things that don't work. Now is the time for innovation. Our budgeted programs and LCAP plan must reflect strategies to improve Tier 1 math instruction, ones that build and reinforce foundational and prerequisite skills so that our students' math achievements progress as they move up the K-12 ladder. Expand mental health services and support. The pandemic has exacerbated many of our students' emotional challenges. Until we acknowledge and address the impact of this trauma, we can expect it to impede learning throughout the district. There's COVID relief money for this purpose. We need to maximize our use of it, especially for our prioritized students. By the June 12th, 16th special board meeting, we expect to have a chance to review and analyze later drafts of the budget and 3-year LCAP plan. At that time, we can provide more comments, questions, and suggestions based on additional and more refined information. At the June 23rd meeting, we have some strong recommendations on how the district can improve its development of the LCAP plan and better work with the PAC in the future. Berkeley schools have the potential to help all of their students to achieve excellence, but to do so, our district needs to expand the programs that best serve its prioritized students and invest in new strategies to address their greatest areas of need. We urge you to incorporate the PAC's recommendations for OVI, Bridge, Tier 1 math instruction, and emotional health services in the next year's budget and the new 3-year LCAP plan. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I don't think that we have any other committee comments. So that means we will move to board member and superintendent comments. Is there a board member who'd like to go first? Anyone? All right, I'm going to call on somebody. I'm going to call on you, Director Sinai.
I was trying not to go first.
Well, we're avoiding that.
Evening, everybody. Okay, thanks. I want to congratulate all of the students and graduates who graduated on last week. It was really an honor to be able to participate in the Berkeley Adult School graduation, albeit it was virtual. It was spirited, it was dynamic, and it was really inspiring to see the adult students who have made it through a pandemic to get their high school diploma, and their families were on the Zoom screen, and it was just very exciting. Also got to go to the Berkeley High Academic Choice. Director Babbitt, I think I did A through O, and the Academy for Medicine and Public Service and the Bridge program, all of which were just truly inspiring. I want to thank all the teachers and staff who really worked tirelessly to create wonderful experiences for our students and their families, to see people in person and the joy of seeing how much some people grew. Some of the teachers talked about kids being taller than them now because they just see them on Zoom screens. And just to see the passion and the heartfelt sincerity of so many of the student speakers who talked about the challenges that they experienced over the year, and to see the power of love in the community on the bleachers of their family members and friends who were there to support them. So it was a wonderful round of graduations. In some ways, the intimacy of being in the small groups versus the thousands, at the Greek or the Haas Pavilion created a whole different dynamic. And I think from the feedback I got from students and families, it was really enjoyable and so fortunate and powerful that we got to do it in person. So Dr. Stevens and all of the staff, I just want to applaud you for making it happen. And it was really a great experience. I also want to thank the Berkeley High leadership and staff for doing the presentation last week, opening the door to what the planning was looking for in the block schedule, and hearing the feedback from students and families and board members that while the idea of doing that kind of planning and moving forward is a welcomed opportunity, trying to do it in the coming year seemed too fast. So I look forward to hearing the ongoing discussions that the staff have at Berkeley High and how we can really engage a genuine, authentic dialogue with the families and the students, so that whatever change comes about is really well thought through and prepared for, so that we serve our students the best. And lastly, I want to thank the students for the Vote 16. And I really want to thank the attorney, Margaret Prinzing, who has really dogged this issue throughout the pandemic. I'm the board rep who's the liaison with this project, and she has kept us informed. She has, I was going to say harangued, she has been very persistent with the county in keeping this ball rolling. And it definitely does give momentum that Oakland has passed it. And our former colleague, Josh Daniels, has been active in the Oakland Unified effort. So I look forward to, and I think our students can count on the board continuing to champion this effort. And hopefully 2022 will become the first election where our 16 and 17-year-olds can vote for school board. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Sinai. Director Babbitt, you want to go next? No? Director Vasudev?
Sure. I also just want to thank everyone for coming tonight and for your public comments. I really appreciate the time that you're taking to join our board meeting. I know the school year is over, so very appreciative of those of you that are here with us throughout these last final board meetings. I also want to echo what my colleague, Director Sinai said. It was great to hear from the Vote 16 group. And thank you so much for your advocacy to lift up student voices. I mean, we're here to serve you. And just like my colleague, I'm waiting for 2022 to make sure that we can make the implementation of Measure Y1 a reality. So thank you. I also want to congratulate all the class of 2021 graduates. I was honored to attend the API student graduation, the Latinx student graduation at Berkeley High, and the multilingual program graduation. And I will say that the highlight of all of these ceremonies for me, these small intimate ceremonies, was really hearing the students' speeches. And I remember this one moment at the multilingual graduation where one of our students, she went up and she said she was so proud because she was the first woman in her family, the first girl in her family to graduate high school. And now I was the first girl in my family to graduate from college and to go to grad school. So that moment was particularly touching to me. And it was just really beautiful to hear how resilient our students are. This year was what I can't even imagine being a senior this year, and just how resilient you all were, and the hard work and the effort that our students and our families and our educators put into to making sure that our seniors had a wonderful graduation. Thank you so much to all the BHS community and to our students in particular. I also want to say congratulations to all our newly reclassified students and to Ms. Gloria Munoz for all of her efforts to support our English language learners this year. También quiero felicitar a nuestros estudiantes reclasificados. Como dijo la maestra Muñoz, estamos muy orgullosos de ustedes y de su compromiso en ser destacados como estudiantes bilingües. Como una persona bilingüe, yo también comparto este honor con ustedes. También quiero agradecerle a todos los papás que vinieron a dar comentarios públicos sobre nuestro presupuesto. Les agradezco mucho por estar aquí porque yo sé que el proceso de poner el presupuesto del distrito, determinar ese proceso ahorita es bastante complicado. Yo sé que están tomando bastante tiempo para ir a las reuniones del distrito y se les agradece el tiempo, el esfuerzo, y yo sé que lo hacen por el bienestar de nuestros estudiantes. Entonces, muchísimas gracias por todos sus esfuerzos y sepan que todos sus comentarios significan mucho para nosotros. Yo sé que nuestro superintendente los escucha con bastante, pues, con bastante agradecimiento también, yo también, los otros directores también, que significa mucho cada vez que nos escriben o que vienen a estas reuniones, que yo sé que es un esfuerzo adicional que están haciendo. I also just really quickly will say in English what I just said, but thanks to everyone who gave comments about our budget, that this process can be a little clunky, a little complicated, you know, in the final treks of the school year, but I really appreciate everyone who comes and who gives public comments and who writes to us, and all our different committees for their efforts, to the PAC for your comments tonight too, just to help guide us through this really challenging process. And, you know, we're all here to make the best decisions that we can for our students and for next year. And so I really value all of your efforts in giving us all this wonderful feedback. Thank you.
Sorry, thanks, Director Vasudev. Director Babbitt? Vice President Brown, you want to go?
I'll go if Director Babbitt wants a couple of seconds, because my comments are super short. But thank you all so much for joining us this evening. Thank you to our Vote 16 presenters. So proud of your advocacy. I'm so proud of your mobilization efforts to ensure that we make sure that we prioritize our young people having the opportunity to vote, also while ensuring that the students who are eligible to vote now have the ability to do so by registering them to vote. Your efforts are incredible, and so thank you so much for that and for your presentation tonight. Also, congratulations to our graduates. I know I said it last week, but congratulations to our graduates. I had the pleasure of attending Black graduation with Director Babbitt, and it was just an amazing and incredible event. I've attended, I don't know how many Black graduations at Berkeley High, including my own, but this one was absolutely special. The resilience, the go-getter attitudes, the just brilliance that was exemplified in that place brought me to tears. We talked about it in a closed session today. It definitely brought me to tears. But I'm so proud of all of our graduates and proud to know that many of them, majority of them, are continuing their education at 2-year and 4-year colleges. And also happy to see Superintendent Stevens there as well to offer support. But congratulations to all of our amazing graduates across the district. I want to say congratulations also to our students who were reclassified, which is a major educational goal. So congratulations to those students and to our students who received the seal of biliteracy. I know that one of our past or former school board directors was very helpful in ensuring that we have that as a possibility for our students at USD. So it's wonderful to see how many names continue to be added to the list year after year. So congratulations to those students. And finally, thank you to those who came out tonight for public comments, specifically around your advocacy around the budget, and to those whose voices weren't elevated tonight in public comment, but have taken the opportunity to email us about our priorities and for your advocacy around those priorities. So thank you so much for doing that. And finally, I'm having a bit of an eye issue. So if you see my camera off, I'm not disengaged, just working on my allergies and sinuses, thanks to the wonderful wind that came through Berkeley today. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Brown. Dr. Babbitt?
Okay, I'll go. I wanted to go close to last so that I could just firmly echo all of my colleagues' wonderful comments. And just really close with saying, what a year. Congratulations again to all of us just for making it this far. During my first 175 days on this school board, so much has happened. Some of the major areas of focus that I set out to work on have all seen progress, from the safe reopening of schools to increased staffing for special education students to improved benefits and share of cost. Progress is being made, slowly but surely. All of us working together to wholeheartedly support each other is what will continue to make progress possible. As we move forward into summer break, I think of next year, I want to encourage all of us to take time to rest, relax, and forgive. Forgive those who hurt you. Forgive those who said or did things which were offensive to you in pursuit of advocacy for our students or faculty. Because if we allow unforgiveness to take root within our community, the progress we all desire for the next generation of leaders, taxpayers, inventors, activists, and so forth will continue to be delayed, and our kids can't wait. Focus on forgiveness because you are needed. The best part of you is needed. And holding on to unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Release it. Forgive us, your school board directors and administrators who you feel may have let you down, your union leaders, those within your family, those who sat on committees or in parent groups with you, co-workers, whoever has harmed you that may never say sorry. Forgive. It's not worth losing focus on meeting the needs of our kids or your pursuit of peace and happiness. This is my message today because I want the joy I felt over this past weekend at the graduation celebrations I attended to be continuous in our community. We, the adults of this community, must create the social emotional support needed for our students by also doing what is needed for ourselves. Let this summer be your moment, and remember that forgiveness is continuous. It may take forgiving the same people for the same issue until you reach that point in the emotional toolbox where you can just toss it in the trash and keep moving. My daughter, who is on her way to college, is the result of the BUSD community working together. She and many others are a representation of the possibilities created when we work together. When I first became a parent advocate and saw the disproportionate outcomes in BUSD, I asked, what are the other families doing to get better results? The answer was supplementing where they could and advocating where they couldn't. I want to thank all of the BUSD staff and administrators who helped ensure they received high quality instruction, the support programs provided through the after-school programs, the Peralta Colleges, UC Berkeley, through YGB, STEM Steps, Cal Scholars, Mosaic Camp, OFI, City Summer Day and Overnight Camps, field trips, PTA, and Berkeley Public Schools Fund grants. Many caregivers share this gratitude with our BUSD village. I will continue to advocate so that programs like these are available to more BUSD families. At every point in my child's educational journey, I can point to a supplemental direct service that supported positive future outcomes. BUSD didn't provide all of these services. I had to go out and find them and even funding for them. Then I began to advocate for them to become a part of BUSD. Lifting as we climb, I am because you are. So let's rest, relax, forgive, and release, because the work ahead of us is just as great as the work we have overcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Babbitt. Really appreciate those comments. And I echo them, and I echo my colleagues' comments, and congratulations. I was reading about a school board meeting in Virginia last night that some of you may have read about, in which hundreds of community members showed up to protest the teaching of critical race theory in K-12 schools in that county. And never mind that, as the superintendent in that district repeatedly told the crowd, critical race theory is not being taught in K-12 schools. I appreciated one comment on Twitter that said, isn't critical race theory a law school class? If it's being taught in high school, those kids must be hella smart. And it is taught in the law school I teach in. But of course, the debate around the country about critical race theory isn't about critical race theory. It's about the latest racist boogeyman that Fox News has ginned up. And it's about the fears of white people who believe that an acknowledgement of white supremacy and its continued stranglehold on so many of our institutions is a threat to them and their children. And in reading about these debates going on around the country, it's hard not to feel appreciation for our community, which is far from perfect, certainly not free from racism, overt or systemic. But as a board and as a community, I think we actually start from the premise that an acknowledgement of the role that white supremacy played in the founding of our country and its continued role in the structure of so many of our institutions is necessary. We start from that premise, that this acknowledgement is not a threat to anyone, but rather a prerequisite for dismantling the institutional barriers that lead to inequity and in unequal opportunity for children entering our public schools, some of the inequity along the lines of what my colleague just mentioned. We're close to finalizing our budget for next year. And we find ourselves in the rare position of having some limited but real resources to put towards new initiatives that will help us achieve our equity goals. In my experience, in my 6.5 years on the board, it's a rare moment in a state that perpetually underfunds public education. Usually we're wrestling over what critical programs and services to cut. I'm much more used to those discussions, and they can be fraught discussions, tense discussions, very difficult decisions that we have to make about reductions. But I also think sometimes discussions about what new programs and services to use our limited available resources on can also be fraught. There's so much pent up need in this district, especially as we emerge from the pandemic. And it's heartbreaking to have some resources, but not be able to meet all of the need that we know exists in our community. We know that we have some additional funds. We also know we can't do everything we want to do, and we have to make hard decisions. The superintendent and his staff, with the input of the community, has developed a budget that, as I mentioned before, we're close to finalizing. Director Basudev mentioned this, but I know that people watching our budget process, it can be confusing. So just to be clear, we're just discussing it tonight. We're not taking any action tonight. If there's tinkering that the board wants to suggest or give direction about, tonight is the night. Next Wednesday, the superintendent, and you can correct me if I'm wrong about any of this, Dr. Stevens, but next Wednesday, the superintendent will present for a first reading what is essentially the final budget, informed by tonight's discussion and further input from our stakeholder groups. And then on June 23rd, we'll have our final meeting of the school year where we will formally vote to approve the budget. And as we all know, when we talk about budgets are an expression of values, but also priorities. And I feel really fortunate to be a part of a district and a school board that shares the values of equity, of social justice, a rejection of white supremacy. And I really believe that we all share these values and that they inspired all of us to seek the positions that we're in. And within the context of those values, our priorities can sometimes differ. And we can disagree about priorities. And in fact, I hope we do, because that's the sign, I think, of a healthy governing board. And I just want to say that I hope that nobody watching this meeting or participating in it, for that matter, mistakes disagreement about priorities in our budget with divergent values. We've had our disagreements about priorities. We'll continue to have them, but never once have I doubted our commitment to our shared values. And in light of what I read about last night in Virginia, but just in general, I don't take that for granted at all. I feel so fortunate to be a part of this community and this governing team. And I'm looking forward to our presentation and discussion about the budget tonight. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Stevens, for your comments.
Thank you very much, President Alper. I am preceded by many eloquent remarks this evening, and I appreciate all of them. I'm going to offer just a few words of thanks to a great many people who have been working over the last few weeks to pull off what many have described as a very joyous and celebratory final week of the school year. To all of the folks at Berkeley High School, the administrative team, all of the teachers, the teacher leaders, and then to call out a few groups who worked tirelessly to pull this off. All of our maintenance and operations workers, our custodial staff who worked all weekend long, and our school safety officers, every single one of whom worked 3 straight 12-hour days in a row to be able to provide a safe and welcoming environment for our graduation ceremonies. Thank you to all of you. And then this is for you, Assistant Superintendent Pauline Follansby. Tammy Rose wanted me to pass along that you were awesome through this whole thing. You and your team were so helpful in getting all the contracts in place to be able to provide services for these graduations. So kudos to you. Thank you. I also want to just sort of send a special shout out to our principals. Most of our teachers now are either gone for the summer or cleaning up their classrooms. Principals are just finishing up their work as well and then heading off to what Director Babbitt described as a much needed period of rest and healing. So I just want to offer a very special thank you to all of our principals on your final days of work for this year. Please know that we all have seen your extraordinary efforts over the course of this pandemic to take care of your communities and to resolve a really daunting set of sort of perplexing challenges over the course of these 12 months. So to our principals, thank you very much. For folks who are watching this evening, I'd also like to draw your attention to an item that's included as information for a second board meeting in a row, and this is a draft policy about the enrollment of our students in the two-way immersion program. We will be having, I anticipate, a vote on this in the coming board meeting, but do want to draw your attention to the presence of that draft policy included as an informational item here. This is a very interesting policy. I think we will be one of very few districts who are attempting to sort of remake enrollment into a two-way immersion program using a variety of different categories. And we're very thankful for the creativity both of our community members, our staff, teachers, principals, and board in crafting this really innovative enrollment policy for two-way immersion. And then I have just a quick birthday message. So you may have noticed that Assistant Superintendent Samantha Tobias Espinosa is not here. One guess why she's not. She's celebrating her birthday tonight, and so we've given her special dispensation from her duties so that she can be with her family and enjoy a birthday dinner. So Sam, happy birthday to you. We miss you this evening. So with that, President Alper, I'm going to turn it right back to you.
Thank you and happy birthday, Sam. Okay, where are we? Oh, the consent calendar is where we are. Can I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Vice President Brown. Ms. Chires?
Director Vasudeva?
Yes.
Director Babbitt?
Yes.
Director Sinai?
Yes.
Vice President Brown?
Yes.
President Alper?
Yes. Okay, thank you all. Now we'll move, okay, so we have two, no, wait, what time is it? Oh, it's 8:17, okay. We have two discussion items. We're gonna have to have a very quick, it'll just be a minute long, probably, public hearing on item 14.1, but let's move, but it's not 9 o'clock yet. So we will move to the first of our two discussion items. And Dr. Stevens, the first one is the draft local control and accountability plan. If it's possible to, if there's natural breaks along the way, that it would make sense to stop and pause for questions. Let's do that so that we don't have to build up our questions until the end of the whole presentation. Does that make sense?
It does, and I appreciate your help with that. If there seems to be a point at which I may have missed a natural pause, please do let me know that.
Okay,
great.
I will. And we've allocated an hour for this item if we need it.
Great. So we'll jump in. I want to preface this by saying that it would, in previous presentations on the LCAP, we've been joined by Director of State, Federal, and Special Projects, Michelle Sinclair. Last day of Michelle Sinclair's contractual work year came this week, and so I am stepping in her stead. And so we'll do my very best to answer questions this evening. It's really been Michelle Sinclair leading the drafting of the LCAP, both through her facilitation of the Parent Advisory Committee, work with the DLAC, as well as her presence in community meetings, as well as her review of lots and lots of community input. So we're going to walk through a slide presentation that will essentially sort of shorten and show in different ways the full 70-page LCAP that is currently attached to this evening's board agenda. We do encourage members of the public to check out our LCAP. We'll be posting it on our website after tonight's meeting, along with another electronic survey where members of the community can comment on any aspect of the draft LCAP plan. I'll also walk through the process in June that will lead to the eventual approval of the local control accountability plan. And we'll try as best I can over multiple slides to illustrate the connection between the conversation about the LCAP plan to the budget. And so there will be sort of multiple connections between this presentation and the second presentation this evening. Number of people as well to thank, especially want to call out Natasha Beery, who's been so helpful in many of these conversations and keeping track of the details. So thank you to Natasha. Jumping in, for folks who are not familiar, the Local Control Accountability Plan is both an annual and 3-year strategic planning template created by the state of California. It's required for all public school districts here in the state. Schools must submit it and then both approve it through a formal board vote, and then submit it to the local county office of education for eventual approval. The goal of the LCAP is essentially to tell the story of the district, to identify a district's strengths and its weaknesses, to share with the public exactly what actions and goals it is setting, and then to demonstrate to the community through a series of metrics the district's progress towards those goals. As we've created our draft LCAP, we've drawn from the data that's available to us, which admittedly this year is less than in previous years because of the pandemic. Tonight, we'll walk through some of that data. We'll share draft goals, metrics, and actions. And then we'll dig deeper into a number of important focus areas. We've had a sort of effort over the last couple of weeks to try and dissect the LCAP plan and sort of put it back together in a variety of different ways. And we hope that this slide deck has succeeded in representing the draft LCAP. Again, just as a reminder for folks who are viewing from home, the LCAP is designed as a 3-year strategic plan. It describes goals, actions, services, and expenditures. And it is meant overall to support positive outcomes for all students, including prioritized students. It is meant to tell our particular story, and it's also meant to represent multiple components of our overall spending on student achievement. That includes the general fund, that includes what is called the supplemental budget, often referred to here in Berkeley as the LCAP budget. And then we also include in our local control accountability plan other revenue sources such as BARA and BSEP. We have drawn from a number of data sources to identify both strengths and weaknesses of Berkeley Unified. That includes the California School Dashboard. We will compare in this presentation some of our successes in the aggregate, both to the state and to other districts. We'll highlight our challenges, which as the board and public well know, have to do with the disaggregation of this data and our ongoing struggle to provide adequate supports for students who we describe as prioritized. I'll describe those groups very shortly. And then we'll also review stakeholder feedback, and more specifically, feedback we've received from true important parent advisory groups, the Parent Advisory Committee and the District English Language Advisory Committee. So let's jump into a high-level overview of some of Berkeley's data. This is a comparison of Berkeley Unified to 50 very similar districts here in California. We went and found districts that have an enrollment of about 6,000 students within our own, so somewhere between 4,000 and 14,000 students, or 16,000 students. And then looked for districts that had a similar unduplicated student rate as ours. And then we're able to develop these comparative measures for our district versus others in the state. What you can see here are rankings on a scale of 1 to 50, where 1 is the highest ranked of our 50 comparable peer districts. You can see in the rating of college and career readiness that Berkeley is in the lead, is first in the sort of pack of 50 districts. And then reading across these indicators, where green is a positive marking, where blue is the most positive, yellow is in the middle, and red and orange not represented here. You can see the rankings of Berkeley versus these other districts. There's a lot to be proud of here, and I think the community is right to hold up Berkeley Unified as in the aggregate producing many positive results for our students. Here is another representative sort of sample of success data. In the first portion of the slide, you can see Berkeley Unified versus the state of California. And here again, we're looking at the aggregate student achievement. That means all of our students collected together. So we're looking at averages across all of our populations. You can see that compared to the state of California, that we are typically more than double-digit percentage points above our peer districts in California in English language arts, in math, college and career readiness, A through G rates. This is the CSU and UC eligibility rate, and that we are below our district peers in California with respect to chronic absenteeism and with respect to suspensions. We also have a lot to be proud of in the aggregate about growth over time. You can see that ELA achievement has grown over time for 4 of the last 5 years. Math, also a +8% increase for 4 of the last 5 years. This is using the state's test, which was not administered last year. And then you can see very respectable growth in the graduation rate of African-American students here in Berkeley over the last 3 years. Also strong growth in the indicator called college and career readiness. What we are also obliged to do, both ethically and because of the template, is to look to see which student populations in Berkeley are not performing at these sort of higher average rates. And this is an ongoing persistent story here in Berkeley, as it is in many other school districts. When we look at a number of our student groups, including African-American students, English learners, students with disabilities, Latinx students, and others who are socioeconomically disadvantaged, we begin to see gaps. And some of these gaps are quite troubling, as they have been for some time. So if we just focus in on Black and African-American students here in Berkeley, you'll see a number of startling statistics, ones that should alarm all of us. For example, that African-American students are half as likely to meet ELA and math standards as their counterparts. You can see some of the percentage points, 29% versus 67% in English language arts, 22% versus 62% in math. These are startling. We've been aware of them, and yet we should continue to be shocked and called to action that these results, admittedly 2 years old, but that these results are the ones we call our own. You can see similar gaps with respect to college and career readiness, a very troubling gap with respect to college readiness, including being able to matriculate into a California State University or a University of California campus. That one is, I think, especially worrisome. You can see chronic absenteeism rates being higher, as well as suspension rates. If we look at English language learners, we see similar disparities. In fact, many of them are even more stark than we see for African American learners. You can see those showing up in ELA and math performance, as well as graduation, college and career readiness, as well as other indicators. When we look at the performance, the achievement of students with disabilities, again, we see very comparable gaps, ones that are calls for all of us to action and ones that really animate the planning and budgeting process. And so it's this backdrop that will, I know, sort of inspire comments among advisory committees that has been the sort of impetus for our own planning. And I know that is going to be part of questions and discussion as we move towards an improved LCAP and approved budget. For many months now, we've been engaged with a variety of our community stakeholders and doing so in a variety of ways. We have a number of formal committees here in Berkeley Unified, including the Parent Advisory Committee, the District English Language Advisory Committee, the Superintendent's Budget Advisory Committee, as well as an Educator Advisory Committee. All of these are important aspects of our ability to reach out to members of our community, to hear them, to listen attentively, and to draw in the best thinking from our community in the formation of our plans. In addition to these formal advisory committees, we have been for a number of months engaged to solicit feedback from the community, both about the substance of our LCAP plan, as well as the use of supplemental funding from the state and federal government for the use of COVID money. So we've been conducting lots and lots of town halls, stakeholder sessions, family circles. School board members have been making themselves available, and we've been consulting with staff members such as principals, teachers, and district office staff in order to develop these plans. Here in gray, sort of call out boxes are a variety of the sort of themes that we've heard very consistently. You will hear strong themes related to OFE, the Office of Family Engagement and Equity, support for our bilingual and monolingual Spanish-speaking families, among others. You can also see desire to see improvement in math, English language arts, English language development, and support for African American and Latinx students, as well as call outs for better supports around mental health, students with disability, and then particularly addressing students' isolation and the desire to reintegrate into campuses after a long period of pandemic learning. Drilling down on more specifically on two of our really important parent advisory committees. As you heard a representative say earlier, these committees have been submitting feedback to the board and to central office staff now for a number of months. And so we have summarized that feedback here in a more detailed call out for both the Parent Advisory Committee and the District English Learner Advisory Committee. And we've sort of sourced each of these points of feedback to the original statement made either to the board or in the context of a meeting. So you can see among Parent Advisory Committee feedback, the desire for increased family engagement, for the effective evaluation of our programs, for mental health supports, a better, more comprehensive assessment system, and then focusing on our prioritized students, both through the use of supplemental funds and other resources. From our English Language Advisory Committee, we've been hearing very steadily the desire to revise our 2014 EL Master Plan so that it is updated to reflect the most recent set of standards and guidelines from the state, as well as current best practice. We've been hearing for calls for increased monitoring of reclassified students, whom we celebrated earlier in the evening. Improved family communication and support, and then support for ELD teaching, for English language development teaching on all of our campuses. We hope what we've done is to, through the LCAP process and the budgeting process, be able to effectively distribute resources across these many priorities. And so for folks who are working at home, listening from home, you'll see that a number of these topics are included both in this presentation and the presentation on the budget to follow. to talk just briefly about where we are in our process. Last week, we were together, received feedback on our LCAP plan. We appreciate that. We've worked over the course of the week to be able to put this presentation together and to refine budget recommendations. Our SBAC came together just last night, and that I think was June 8th, to both review recommendations from me and staff, as well as to place a vote. We plan to work with our DLAC tomorrow evening. We are working right now with our PAC co-chairs to be able to pull the PAC together before the next meeting of the board, which is scheduled to take place on June 16th. And then President Alper referred earlier to the official public hearing on our LCAP taking place just 1 week from today on June 16th, with an anticipated approval by the Board of Education of June 23rd, which permits us to submit the LCAP to the Alameda County Office of Education by the required end of June deadline. So I'm going to jump into the elements of the LCAP now, but President Alper, this may be a chance just to press pause, see if there's questions about any of the feedback we've received or our process. And then I propose to jump into the substance of the LCAP plan.
Yeah, that's great. Director Sinai.
A comment and a question. I want to just highlight under the PAC comments, 2 of their 4 letters. One was on the sustaining of the bridge program, and I didn't see that in your column. And the other was what Ms. Pulich talked about in relation to math. So they had 4 testimonies: mental health, bridge, math, and OFI were their top 4 priorities. So 2 of those weren't included in that column, and I just want to make sure that we call them out. And then the second is a question for either you or President Alper. The June 16th public hearing, there's still the option, because I heard Ms. Pulich say that they were going to come with more formal recommendations on the 16th. And I think I heard President Alper say it's kind of the final budget for public hearing to then be approved on the 23rd. Can you just clarify whether on the 16th we can still make amendments, well, not amendments because it hasn't been passed yet, but we can still make adaptations and changes on the 16th if people come forward with recommendations that we feel like we need to have reflected in there?
It is still possible. What I would propose is that from one meeting to the next, so let's say from tonight to the 16th to the 23rd, that if there are changes from 1 week to the next, that we would share those changes with the board so that the board can be apprised of how we're still listening to feedback, both from the board and members of the community. By the time we arrive at the approval on the 23rd, I would consider that at that point, it's ideal that we're not trying to amend the LCAP when we're sort of engaged in approving it.
So then just to be clear, because I think one of the other challenges that both the PAC and the DLAC have been clarity and transparency around dates. So I want to be really clear. Do they need to get feedback to the board and to you before the 16th so that you can potentially reflect that in on the 16th versus waiting until the 16th to do their public? I mean, it's not like if they send it in advance, they still can't read it publicly for sure. But are we asking them to actually get it to us before the 16th?
We have been. I have a meeting set up with the 2 PAC chairs tomorrow to just get clarity for all of our PAC members about how they aspire to collect feedback from PAC members. So it would be ideal from our perspective to receive that feedback prior to the meeting on the 16th so that we can both reflect that feedback to the board on the 16th and potentially even suggest amendments based on that feedback. So again, I'll be working with the PAC chairs tomorrow to pull this together. And then Director Sinai, I appreciate your summary of the PAC feedback. I suspect that we omitted those things because we have a slide version of this, but I am going to go back into the LCAP document to make sure that the full PAC commentary is listed in the LCAP.
And I might have contributed to the confusion on the dates because I didn't on June 23rd, it's too late to be tinkering. But June what is it, 16th, the next meeting, that, I mean, it's getting late, but it's not that we can't decide to give direction about changes on the 16th. So what I hear you saying, Dr. Stevens, is it's helpful for staff to get that before the 16th. But I think in response to your question, Director Sinai, if we hear it on the 16th and the board wants to do it, it's not too late on the 16th. The 23rd is when it's really too late. Is that okay?
That syncs completely with my understanding.
Okay, and if I think I did kind of say something a little different than that, so apologies on that. Director Babbitt.
I just wanted to add, responding to their written comments. So the comments that they submitted, are you going to be responding in writing to their comments by the 16th or the 23rd, or after the approval, or where's that timeline?
Yeah, so at the moment, and this is why I'd like to sit down with the PAC co-chairs tomorrow, we don't have any formal feedback from the PAC on the LCAP itself. They have submitted multiple statements to the board, and we've been listening in multiple meetings to sort of general feedback, but there's no formal feedback on the LCAP document itself submitted from PAC yet. So it is a legal requirement that we collect that feedback and respond in writing to PAC, and we will do that. I can't speak to the timing of that written response until I understand with the co-chairs when they anticipate having feedback to us.
Okay, and one of the co-chairs is actually away. And so as maybe Julie or one of us as the board rep can also be a part of that process. It's the request that I'm getting from them. So I'm happy to do that.
Great. Thank you.
Director Vasudev.
Thank you, Superintendent Stevens. My question was kind of along the lines of what Director Sinai said, and also what my fellow director, Laura Babbitt, was saying, just as a point of clarity. I know that DLAC provided comments last week for both the LCAP and for COVID funding, right? So I just want clarity. What you're presenting now is only the portion that refers to their LCAP feedback, or is it the whole feedback that they gave last week, including their COVID?
It's all of the feedback collected together. And DLAC, like PAC, has not yet submitted any formal feedback on the LCAP plan itself, but has been commenting on data presentations, has been commenting on various very early drafts.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've been collecting that feedback and using it as we develop the LCAP itself.
I see. And so if it's the feedback that they provided in the letter last week, then a couple of their points are missing in this short summary around parent engagement in Spanish, around the expansion of OFI, which is very similar to the feedback that the PAC gave. So I just want to make sure that we're incorporating what DLAC had sent in the letter last week. And then in terms of what's the process to be able to get their formal LPAC comments tomorrow?
Yeah, I hope to be able to do that tomorrow. So we have a DLAC meeting scheduled for tomorrow evening. And so we'll be walking the DLAC through a very similar presentation and soliciting comments from them.
Great. And will the presentation be available in Spanish tomorrow?
I don't know that it will be entirely. It's this presentation this evening, which we've been working on up to the point of this afternoon. So we're going to do our best to turn around a translated version, but I'm not confident that we'll have the entire deck done by tomorrow afternoon.
Got it. I think like at least the main sections would be great. I'll be there, but at least the main sections would be good in previous meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Babbitt, do you still have your hand up or no? Okay. Dr. Stevens, why don't you continue on?
Great, thank you. From this point, we're going to jump into sort of beginning to look at the substance of the LCAP, what's actually in the plan. So again, this plan is attached to our board agenda. It's about a 70-page long document. It asks that districts fill out a number of prompts in keeping with a template. The template is not ours. We're not able to modify the template. It's a requirement of the state of California that we fill it out. And so many of this presentation will look a little bit different than the template itself. What we've tried to do is take the template and sort of slice it up in various ways. to try and make sense of the sort of logic of the template without having to look through dozens and dozens of pages. So very specifically, we'll be looking at the goals, we'll be looking at the metrics, and that we'll be looking at the actions and services that we're proposing to provide in the next 3 years. Our LCAP consists of 4 goals. Just sort of at the headline level, they consist of a goal related to core classroom instruction, that's goal 1, to the provision of intervention services for students, that's goal 2, to creating a safe, welcoming school environment, goal 3, and to program evaluation and the use of metrics for improvement, that's goal 4. So focusing on goal 1, which has to do with providing high quality classroom instruction for all of our students that ends the racial predictability of academic achievement that we just described by ensuring that systems are culturally and linguistically responsive to the needs of our students. We've identified a number of measures that are included in the LCAP. Now, each of these slides is pretty dense. I may just read a sampling of the contents of each slide, but welcome questions about any of them. So across the course of the sort of pages related to goal 1, we're proposing metrics that have to do with a sufficient standards aligned curriculum that's provided to all students, the percent of students enrolled in at least one AP, IB, CTE, or dual enrollment course. Dual enrollment refers to taking a class at community college, BCC. The percent of 10 through 12th graders who took an AP exam. For your cohort graduation rate, the percent of students who are college and career ready is measured by the dashboard, English learner progress, redesignation rates of English learners, the percent of English learners who are classified as what's called long-term English learners or LTELs, percentage of high school students who get Ds and Fs, CTE completion rate, the A through G completion rate, which again is the sort of set of prerequisites to be able to enroll in either a CSU or UC, and then the internal assessment participation rate as well. Continuing to look just at goal 1, again, focusing on core academic instruction, the LCAP proposes a number of actions, some of which are carried forward from the previous LCAP and some of which are new. Again, these are fairly dense slides. These actions range anywhere from professional development, call out the Literacy Improvement Action Plan, which is calls for a specific focus on phonological processing and dyslexia intervention in grades K through 2. We have math training included, the ongoing provision of math coaches. We have the introduction of the new ethnic studies, TSA, with the idea of developing a K-12 ethnic studies curriculum, ongoing English language development support at all of our schools that includes having TSAs. There's new work included in our budgets for cultural competency training, as well as new funding for integrated ELD training. In the second presentation of the evening, we'll talk about funding for the revision of our EL master plan, all of the work I just mentioned being new. The bridge program is also included as an action. We'll be discussing sort of some supplemental funding for the bridge program in the second hour. And then as well, we include things like instructional technology, AVID, CTE, RISE, a whole variety of programs. If we move over to goal 2 has to do with providing the necessary and timely academic interventions to eliminate barriers to student success. We're proposing in the LCAP 4 specific measures. The percent of students who don't meet English language arts and math standards at particular grades. The percent of middle school students who are completing a math support or intervention class who meet those math standards. Percent of summer school students who earn additional high school credits in the summer before their senior year, and then the overall number of students participating in intervention programs broken down by a variety of demographic factors. Listed in the actions for this goal include our ongoing support of what we call RTI, the Response to Intervention and Instruction teachers, literacy coaches, new supports, introducing the Wilson and Slingerland reading programs into our intervention programs, math support classes, technology supports, which include the provision of Chromebooks on an ongoing basis for students who don't have them at home. That's a pandemic-related innovation. New 504 coordinator at the high school already funded, Common Core Standards aligned summer school for incoming seniors, and then a variety of culturally relevant summer partnerships, such as ones this year with STEM Steps and Camp Edmo. Continuing on with goal 3, again, just looking at measures and actions. We move into the goal related to providing or ensuring that all of our sites have safe, welcoming, and inclusive climates for all students and their families. These progress measures are the following. The percent of teachers who are Black and African American or Latinx who returned to BUSD from the previous year, the percent of teachers who are Black or African American, average daily attendance, suspension rate, percent of teachers who are Latinx, the chronic absentee rate, dropout rates, and student and family survey results. Actions in this goal stretch over 2 slides. Let me introduce the first batch here. So they include things like our student welfare and attendance counselor, behavioral health services, counseling, restorative justice coordinators, all carried over from the previous LCAP. Restorative justice counselors, homeless student counselor, coordination of student services, and family engagement, again, carried over from the previous LCAP. We jump over into a new slide, but continuing to list out actions related to interventions. Here we, actions related to safe and welcoming climate, my apologies. Here we include ongoing work with the African American Success Project, including plans to expand Umoja from its current home at Longfellow to other middle schools. Included in the longer plan are references to the Black Lives Matter resolution, to our coordinated early intervention services plan, or CSACE plan. That plan focuses on the significant disproportionality and identification for special ed services of African American students. And then a number of elements from the still developing African American Success Framework, which we hope to bring to the board next week for an update. The Latinx resolution is included here, as is financial support for the development of a Puente program, both new. Ongoing support for the LEAP classes, intervention counselors, the CSACE plan called out again. Significant investments in work being done by the Office of Civil Rights and Compliance, our own compliance office. Funding for consent education for our high school students, expanded mental health supports, a teacher and leader of color network, as well as specific BERA-funded recruitment efforts for teachers of color. So a whole variety of action items listed here. I should note that not every action that the district takes is included in the LCAP. The LCAP is not intended to be an encyclopedia, but rather calling out highlights of work that the district wishes to hold itself accountable for, and that it wishes to associate with the metrics that I've already listed out. Goal 4 is considerably shorter, just as we look at the measures of progress and then the actions. This particular goal is sort of upgraded to focus particularly on program evaluation and on building capacity for improvement through the use of evidence, through the use of data. We have 2 progressive measures that LCAP supplemental expenditures are completely expended, as well as then an annual review of all of our LCAP indicators by the Board of Education. And it's this particular metric where we're compiling all of these it's essentially the compilation of all the previous metrics for public presentation to the board that is essentially holding ourselves accountable both for the completion of these actions and their outcomes. Actions under this goal include LCAP monitoring with specific attention to building multiple levels of capacity among principals, teachers, central office administrators to collect and use data effectively, as well as more formalized program evaluation support, something that we've been hearing very clearly from all of our advisory committees and from the community. And we've called out a specific target of doing a formal evaluation on 2 focus programs per year. So then I'm going to propose to pause there, President Alper, if that's okay, and then we've got a sort of second batch of sort of representations of the LCAP plan.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to make the same proposal. So before we get into the actual details of our LCAP, what questions, let's see, do folks have about, questions, comments? That's the last part. Presentation. Director Sinai, did you have a question?
I do. It's, you know, I think it's actually more of a comment. Could you go back to the slide on goal 1?
I can.
Keep going up. Yeah, there.
Yep.
So I guess I'd like to understand, again, reflecting on the PAC comments about, and first, I just want to say that this format just makes a lot more visual sense to me. And I want to just acknowledge that I really appreciate the work that staff have done and everybody else who kind of chimed in on how to help make a little bit more cognitive sense of this. So I really want to extend my appreciation for that. You know, math has been, and Ms. Polich mentioned it tonight, has been a high priority for the PAC pretty much year after year after year. And the data demonstrates, as she mentioned in her statement and the PAC mentioned in their letter, the data is just perpetually horrible, particularly disaggregated data. Although really overall data is not that great either. So I'm unsure why looking at our holistic math program isn't in goal 1, but instead is in an intervention goal. I would like us to actually see math, while we may not do a whole cloth review of math next year, just because we're coming back, you know, I mean, implement, you know, a complete change. We've been talking for years now about kind of doing an analysis of our K-12 math program. So similarly to the Wilson, you know, which is kind of a new way of doing our literacy. Is there a reason we wouldn't put math in our high quality classroom instruction and curriculum versus an intervention? And I'd like us to consider that.
I appreciate the comment. There will be, as we go a little bit further into the slide deck, we've sort of assembled all of the action items related to math in a particular slide. And it may be helpful to sort of put a pin, you know, in this particular conversation until we get to that slide. Just as a little bit of, I guess, backstory, before the pandemic, we were actually in the process of leading a math task force. This was something the board had called for, I think, just prior to my arrival as superintendent. That work was underway. The task force was formed and meeting regularly. The pandemic struck and the task force work really came to a close. It really was not resuscitated in any way over the course of the pandemic, given the sheer challenge of navigating the sort of school reopening and distance learning sort of mediums. So it is a possibility to reconstitute that task force, to add that as another action item into the LCAP, and would welcome the thinking of the board about the value of that work being expressed here.
So again, reminding our viewing audience is that this is a 3-year plan.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that context, it does seem to me to make sense for it to be in goal 1. That doesn't mean aspects of it can't be also in goal 2, but to have it omitted from goal 1 seems to me to be a gap. Thank you.
Director Babbitt. Maybe, do you want to unshare your screen, Dr. Stevenson?
Yes, I'm happy to.
So for me, also in goal 1, I was curious as to how we're measuring success around culturally and linguistically responsive needs to our students. For example, if you look at cultural competency training, right? What is the accountability that's going to be associated with that to make sure that those systems are actually implemented?
It's
not enough to just go to the training. How are we going to make that training becomes a practice in implementation?
I don't know that I have the answer to it, although I really appreciate the question. Usually it's the case in the LCAP that the metrics are pretty high level. They tend to be things like I've mentioned, attendance rates, success rates on things like the state exam or even formative assessments. one of the, I think, keys to the success of this LCAP has to do with instituting better program evaluation, which I sort of see as embedded in goal 4. So it has been the case in many districts, including our own, that when we offer professional development, we don't evaluate the effectiveness of that professional development, nor do we have a system for going and checking to see whether or not it's implemented. And I sort of see that this work moving forward, whether it's that or some other example, needs to have stronger program evaluation and support from BREA, so that program managers, professional development providers can conduct those kind of analyses. I don't know that I'm adequately answering your question. We can certainly think more about what could go into the LCAP on that particular question.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about how we're going to build in implementation measurements of accountability, how things are communicated, when you're going to be checking in and monitoring for the progress of implementation. And I'm saying this because we've had a wonderful plan for the last few years, and it's always fallen short when it comes to the actual realization of our goals based on implementation. And so really building out that accountability structure so that we're sure that we can get some progress, right? Because most of this is good on paper, but it comes down to when we implement it and how we implement it. And I think we need to be thinking about that before fall begins as much as possible. So thank you.
Thank you. It's a really good comment.
Thanks, Director Babbitt. Director Bastido?
I just wanted to follow up on Director Babbitt's comment. If we're looking at evaluation, and I really also want to, just before I ask my question, say thank you so much to the staff, because I think that this presentation is much easier to read than the previous one. So thank you for all that hard work. I just wanted to better understand, is like, what's the logic behind only like 2 programs versus, additional programs for evaluation?
We had the LCAP plan specifies this a little bit better. What we were thinking of by way of formal evaluations of 2 sort of focus programs are more on the lines of the kinds of things that we might get from a formal evaluation partnership, bringing in something like WestEd. So for example, in the conversation to come in the next hour about funding the literacy improvement plan, there's a budget line that would actually be for a formal evaluation of our RTI program using a research company like a WestEd or an SRI. And so we meant the sort of formal program evaluation being of that sort, while also sort of building up our program managers' capacity to evaluate the programs they run themselves. So doing things more like surveys, doing observational protocols, as a way of sort of developing local data sets that help us understand whether or not our actions are making a difference.
So if I'm understanding, 2 of the programs would have kind of that like formal WestEd kind of partnership, but the other, we'll still conduct evaluation for the other programs, but they'll be in-house.
That's exactly our thinking, yeah.
Okay, great.
All right, well, it's great that we're stopping along the way to ask questions, but it does also lengthen the presentation. So let's let you move on, Dr. Stevens.
Wait, I just want to point out one more thing.
Yeah, of course, go ahead.
Thank you for letting me point out one thing under goal 1. I see A through G completion rates, but I think it doesn't hit K through 5 success measurements until goal 2 or any of the others. So we need to build in some K through 5, even maybe some middle school progress measurements under goal 1. Thanks, that's all my comment.
Thank you. And I'll refer into the original plan to make sure that that's not just a function of what was presented here in the deck, but I appreciate that you're absolutely right. Goal 1 should include K-12 measures.
Okay, thanks, Director Babbitt. All right, go ahead, Dr. Stevens.
Great. So in the coming set of slides, we're trying to represent the LCAP in a slightly different way. Again, we're just basically kind of taking the standard format provided to us by the state, slicing and dicing it, kind of coming up with different representations. So in the coming slides, what you'll see is that we are sort of creating a slide per topic area or focus area, for example, like English language arts. We've then identified the sort of sum of the investments related to that particular area. We've then included the metric of performance for that particular topic, the student groups in need, representing them demographically, representing current performance and desired performance at the end of the 3-year period, representing key, or I should say a selection of stakeholder feedback. It may not be comprehensive in these slides, as well as then the BUSD actions and services that are aligned to this particular topic along with their cost, whether or not they're new. So these are also dense slides. We hope, though, that they sort of represent in a different way, maybe one that's more comprehensible to us who think about subjects as sort of being helpful. So let's first focus in on English language arts and literacy, something we know is reading class, English language arts classes in middle and high school. So in total, there are $3.25 million of investments in language arts represented in this local control accountability plan. We have metrics throughout the plan that relate to ELA performance on the CASP in both 3rd, 5th, 6th, 8th, and 11th grade. We've represented here our aggregate district-wide performance, which has improved over the last 5 years from 58% to 68% proficiency. Here, we're representing what's in the LCAP with respect to prioritized students who are in need, including socioeconomically disadvantaged students, Black and African American students, students experiencing homelessness, students with disabilities, and English language learners. You can see those disaggregated performance rates there, as well as desired outcomes at the end of the 3-year period. We've represented some key stakeholder feedback from BARPAC, our DLAC, our Educator Advisory Committee, as well as other stakeholders. Again, these are selections of what is a much more comprehensive feedback section in the LCAP plan. And then we list out the actions as they relate to support for English language arts achievement, including our literacy coaches, the Literacy Improvement Action Plan, the selection of a new literacy universal screener called DIBBLES, response to intervention teachers, Wilson and Slingerland reading training, as well as summer school investments. Now I should mark just sort of a couple of these color codes. So any of the new actions and new investments taking place this coming year are marked in red. So you can see, for example, that the Literacy Action Plan, the DIBBLES Universal Screener, and the introduction of Wilson and Slingerland are all new to this year's plan. And they represent hundreds of thousands of dollars in new investments to be added to our ongoing investments. And then I'm also highlighting in yellow an area that will appear in the next presentation on the budget. Just trying to make it fairly clear to viewers and to all of us where we still have some items as yet unfunded and that need to be decided on by the board. If it's not marked in yellow, that means it's already been decided in a previous budget decision. Let's jump over to math. And Director Sinai, I hope this is a helpful representation of the actions included in math, which is not to say that they are entirely sufficient, but this is what's included in the current draft plan. We have metrics, 3rd, 5th, 6th, 8th, and 11th grade. You can see as well that we've improved in the aggregate from 54% proficient to 62%. Again, in our LCAP, we've disaggregated for a number of critical student groups. We represent their current performance levels as of 2019, the last time the state test was administered, and the desired outcome levels at the end of this 3-year period. We've represented some key feedback from PAC, DLAC, and EAC. And then we've clustered together multiple actions as they relate to math, whether or not they show up in Goal 1 or Goal 2. And that includes items in black that are carried over from the previous LCAP, including math trainings. We have as well math coaches and specific support for math U9. Grade 6 through 8 math support classes are included here, funded through our supplemental grant, as well as RTI teachers who also provide math instruction. That's why they're listed twice. We have summer school also listed twice. And then as well, culturally relevant partnerships, such as STEM Steps and Camp Edmo listed here. So there are new investments in math as well. And this sort of represents the collected sort of thinking as of right now related to math in our LCAP. If we move over to support for English language learners, similar representation. You can see the metrics that we are using in various sections of the LCAP, including academic achievement, college and career readiness, graduation rate, English learner proficiency. We had mentioned reclassification rates also included. You can see baseline data for ELA, math, graduation rate, college career readiness rate, as well as EL progress on the California School Dashboard, which itself includes reclassification. And then you can see the desired outcomes. You can see one of the aspects of DLAC's feedback, including the revision of the EL master plan. And then here represented together is the sum of the investments to support English language learners that are represented in the LCAP, including ongoing support for ELD through our ELD teachers, professional development on what's called integrated ELD, as well as to be considered in the next budget presentation, specific set aside for the revision of the 2014 English Learner Master Plan. This next set of slides attempts to capture additional action items as they relate to specific supports for prioritized students. Represented here are action items that mostly fall into Goal 2 and Goal 3. So without reviewing all of these numbers, we're representing here key metrics associated with prioritized students that do relate to K-12 achievement on CASP. You can see up in the top line the percent proficient represented there. You can as well see in the students in need row disaggregation of the 2019 performance of a variety of demographic groups on the CASP assessment, as well as desired outcomes, target outcomes for the end of this 3-year period. We represent key stakeholder engagement. Again, this is a sampling, not a comprehensive representation on this particular slide. And then we list out some of the new and ongoing supports that includes RTI teachers, literacy coaches, Slingerland and Wilson showing up again, math support classes, the addition of a 504 coordinator to our high school, which is actually new, summer school curriculum, summer school availability for K-8 students as well as for seniors, the culturally relevant summer partnerships, and then you can see as well what we're calling the sort of digital divide technology supports. This was a tranche of funding provided by the board about a month ago to continue our program of offering Chromebooks to students who don't have them for at-home use. This is a related set of slides. We're moving now to what we're calling social and emotional learning and cultural supports for prioritized students, so SEL support. This is 2 slides put together. Again, in the interest of time, I'll just go quickly. We have metrics. The students in need are represented here, a selection of stakeholder feedback. And then it's in this particular category where you start to see a lot of the new work or many new aspects in our LCAP, which include new set-asides for cultural competency training, as well as culturally relevant summer partnerships. The African American Success Manager and Emoja program is not new, but you will see support for our Black Studies Department, which has been approved by the board already. The AASP Manager position is in yellow, because it will show up in the budget presentation in the next hour of our meeting. Represented here as well as ethnic studies, the African American Success Framework, which is already funded and approved by both P&O and the board at a value of $60,000. Also included in the LCAP is the Latinx resolution, as well as the Puente program, funded for $40,000 in this development year. And then just to highlight some of the other new work included in the LCAP is the CSACE plan, that significant disproportionality plan that I mentioned earlier, as well as investments in consent education for our high school students. These other items in black are carried forward from the previous LCAP. We've listed out a number of programs, this time under attendance. So again, metrics, students in need, key stakeholder feedback. We've listed OFI here under attendance, recognizing that attendance is not the sole function of OFI. OFI liaisons have many different functions, but simply as a convention in this presentation, put it here, recognizing it could have gone in other places as well. So we are proposing an increase in funding for OFI with a value of $347,000. That's highlighted in yellow because it will be part of the coming hours budget conversation. Also included here, the African American Success Manager Project in Black Studies, as I mentioned before, as well as a variety of sort of attendance related and emotional support related items like the intervention counselors and our Dean of Attendance. We've also represented here college and career readiness supports. Again, the same layout. We hope that this sort of eases the sort of reading burden for everybody interested in the LCAP. And then I'll call out what's in yellow here, proposal to reinforce funding for the bridge program at a value of $110,000. That's highlighted in yellow because we anticipate speaking about this in the next presentation on the budget. So that is a very quick, very high level overview of our 70-page draft LCAP. We do invite still feedback from the community and the board about whether or not this collection of activities and metrics and goals is driving BUSD in the right direction, and if this selection of actions is represented in our LCAP is supportive of our overall vision and goals. So with that, I'll stop sharing my screen and welcome more questions and comments.
All right, thank you, Dr. Stevens. I know from Vice President Brown and I had an opportunity to give some feedback on that presentation and make suggestions about what the different colors should mean and how to pull things out. And I know there's no perfect way to summarize such a long document, but I echo what Director Sinai and Director Basudov said about it's a lot easier to understand this presentation, so I appreciate it.
That's great. Michelle Sinclair, who's not with us tonight, deserves the lion's share of that praise.
Yeah, thank you very much to her. Okay, everybody's raised their hand, so I'll let other people go first. Director Babbitt, and then, sorry, let me just remind everybody about the budget discussion that we have coming up, but this is important. So go ahead, Director Babbitt.
Thank you. I also wanted to say I appreciate this format, specifically that there's this stakeholder feedback section. And so it's saying, you know, that PAC and DLAC are requesting consistent and comprehensive assessment systems. And I'm noticing that most of our targets or metrics are based on standardized testing. And in the past, using those metrics don't help us to inform instruction or inform our practices quickly, especially in future years when we need to make recommendations as to what we're going to refund or cut or, you know, maybe grow. So I'm just hoping that we can, and also make sure that we have educator feedback on what some good goals or good assessment measures can be in this plan, because we know that many of the teachers in our unions, they don't like us, you know, using standardized testing as our main metric of performance, because there are so many other ways in which, you know, they inform instruction from others' testings or assessment screenings. So all of that to say, please add more measurements that aren't just based on standardized testing and that can be used timely. Thank you.
Thanks for that. I am, I'll just say yes to all of that. I do believe that the LCAP plan, you know, includes sort of more sort of benchmark style metrics like the STAR assessment. And we have actually just started what I think is a really exciting project being led by our BREA coordinator, Tom Reinhardt, to sort of look more comprehensively at our K-8 assessment system. That work in its first semester produced the decision to adopt the DIBELS universal screening, essentially replacing the STAR assessment in K-2. And that work will continue into the coming school year. I know that he, the professional development coordinator, Leader Martinez, and others are committed to just continuing the work of inspecting our overall assessment system in both math and English language arts, and then recommending further assessments as well.
And I think just to jump into, I think what's implicit maybe, or maybe you actually said it explicitly, Director Babbitt, but in what she said is the importance of having input from and buy-in from teachers in the classrooms in terms of developing what assessments they believe, because they all believe in assessments. It's a question of which ones they think are most important and most nimble in the way that I think Director Babbitt was talking about, which I really appreciated that. And then before I go to Director Vasudeva's next, just a reminder that that there is more in the LCAP than in this presentation, right? These slides cover the high level, or as much as you could fit into a slide without making it completely incomprehensible, but it's not everything.
Yeah, that's correct. The document itself is more than 70 pages long. And so this is just an attempt to represent and summarize that very long document.
Okay. Director Vasudev?
Well, I really appreciate the summary, Superintendent Stevens. I don't think the public would appreciate 70 pages of a presentation tonight. But I did want to just ask, like, for some of those desired outcome percentages, they're kind of close to the baseline, right? And so one, just like at a high level, how did you come to those, desired outcome percentages? And two, what happens if, like, in the middle of the LCAP, we hit those numbers? Do you adjust them? What happens?
Yeah, that's great. What we tried to do is a few things. So we've been working with a consultant just to sort of help us with a number of aspects of this, including setting those targets. And we really wrestled with these, as I know every district does. We would like, of course, that those targets are higher. But we don't want to set targets that are simply unrealistic and fantastical. We also don't want to underestimate, our ability to produce improvement on state tests. So what we tried to do is set ambitious year-over-year goals somewhere in the 3 to 4 to 5% range per year, so that we are seeing over time steady growth. And there's research that sort of suggests that districts that are able to realize that kind of steady percentage growth each year are the ones that are very likely making system change, versus districts that tend to see up and down sort of growth and then decline over time. That's probably more a function just of particular cohorts of students taking the test from one year to the next. So we did give it thought. We do welcome feedback on those metrics as well. And then to answer the second part of your question, we revise this LCAP as part of a formal process every year. We're required to report on our progress towards these measures, and then we can update the LCAP as we see fit. It is our plan, but that includes the sort of annual update, which will come to the board and ultimately be approved by the board.
Got it. So then do we work with a consultant on an annual basis, or we just kind of see how we are? Like, what happens in between?
Yeah, I don't know that we would. The decision to sort of reach out for some help had a little bit to do with some staff transitions taking place on our part as well. I think we might have been better equipped to go it alone with a full complement in place, but that was not the case for the closing months of our school year.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice President Brown, and then Director Sinai.
Okay, thank you. I want to thank, of course, Superintendent Stevens, you for doing the presentation, but also for an appreciation to Michelle Sinclair in her absence for her hard work and her timely work in responding to our needs within like a week. So thank you, Michelle, for doing that. Superintendent Stevens, can you take some time to go back to the page about mathematics?
If you'll give me just one moment.
Thank you. And while you're looking for that page, I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. Red is what's new, and then what's highlighted in yellow is also what is new, but we haven't found a place for it yet, or is that what you mean?
Yeah, that's correct. Red is new, highlighted in yellow. It will actually appear in the budget presentation coming up in the next hour.
Okay, great. So my first question, I guess, is are there any summer school just allocations for grades 9 through 11? We see, summer school for the incoming seniors, and then we see curriculum for K through 8. But is there anything here that addresses our 9th, 10th, and 11th graders?
There is, although we didn't include it in the LCAP. And this is just one of those sort of editorial dilemmas. How much do you include in the LCAP and at what risk of making it, sort of overly unwieldy? We do have a lot of summer offerings this summer for high school students that just are not on this list. We didn't include them in the LCAP, although they do exist. They include our extended school year program for high school students who have disabilities. We're offering credit recovery across all of the grades. And then we have a CTE bridge program as well that's operating. And that's in addition to the sort of credit recovery for incoming seniors. So it's a bit more of a robust list at the high school level than what is represented on this and what has been included so far in the LCAP.
Okay, thank you. And I know everything can't be included, but it's good to know that it is being included for us who may have questions about it. And then if you don't mind going to the social emotional learning and cultural support slide.
Yes.
I wanted to ask about a couple of things. I think the second page is maybe, yeah. So I'm a little concerned. I mean, I'm happy to see all of these cultural supports that are happening for our students, but I'm a little concerned about our social emotional learning and also addressing the mental health of our students, and that I don't see any new designation or new allocations for that. So can you speak to that, Superintendent Stevens?
I can. Why don't I sort of first talk about mental health support. So we've been very actively exploring with a number of organizations potential partnerships to expand mental health support on our campuses. We've had conversations now, I think, with 3 different potential providers and are looking for more. We haven't yet sort of signed on the dotted line with any organization about expanding counseling services on campuses. We do have the resources to be able to do that. We still have unexpended COVID funds. We have solid leads, but don't yet have a contract. And so that is sort of work that is solidly in front of us for this summer. We're committed to completing it by the time we reopen in August. But it has been so far sort of difficult to find the sort of right mix of capacity and availability with these providers.
So just because it isn't listed here in our LCAP plan or identified in our budget later, does not mean that there isn't any more money to designate to making sure that work happens.
That's correct. Yeah. And in the coming budget discussion in the next hour, I'll sort of give a quick outline. I mean, to sort of, tip our hand, we have about $2.5 million still in unexpended COVID dollars that can be used for things like expanded mental health support, tutoring, expanded family engagement and education, or other board priorities. They're not represented in the LCAP as of yet, but we do have those resources available to us, and we'll just continue our planning over the course of the summer.
All right, Director Sanai. Oh, Director Sanai, you're muted.
Yeah, thank you. One question. So some things show up in multiple charts, like the Wilson. When the dollar amount is shown on top of the chart, is there some duplicate dollars in there, or those are dollars unique to that particular category?
I believe they're duplicated. I can be sure of that. I can check in tomorrow on that. We sort of struggled. It's just sort of a function of how we've represented things. So take, for example, the RTI teachers.
Yeah.
They showed up in under multiple subject areas, math and English language arts. That doesn't mean we're spending $2 million on RTI teachers. It means we're spending $1 million. And I'd have a feeling that the total probably reflects that expenditure in both English language arts and math.
Okay, so I just want to make sure for PAC members and DLAC members who are trying to do work at home to prepare for their feedback and their recommendations, that they don't sum all those numbers because there's duplicates in there. So like where they see the EL coach, the literacy coaches, the math coaches, there's a variety of different places where things show up more than once. So it's going to take a little teasing out if they're looking at how the funding is being used. And maybe that will be more reflective when we talk about the budget. But somehow for our committees, they need they need to see the crosswalk between the plan and the budget to where they don't have to do a lot of the math at home. So that's one challenge. So I'm gonna just hammer it one more time around the math, because when you look at your very first slide, and I don't think you need to go there, but when you talk about growth and we look at the metrics, we grew 9 points in English language arts in our district-wide aggregate. We grew 8 points in our district-wide aggregate. We're number 16, with comparable districts. It's not our prioritized students who are having that growth. And so when I look at the strategies and the budget allocations for literacy coaches, math coaches, the variety of things that are in there, my question is, how does that direct to those specific students who need to see the growth in their own outcomes? Because some of those things are school-wide, right? So their literacy coaches are for all the teachers to improve, and then for some students. So my question is kind of like, how are we going to really drive our programs to the students who need them? And it's not just through RTI, it's through classroom instruction and curriculum development, and how we're differentiating it to the students who really need the support. So if we're going to have more ambitious metrics, because I view those metrics as the floor. To say we're going to go 3-4 points in 3 years, what that tells me is we're not concentrating our resources on the kids who need it. It means that we're hoping they get it through not through osmosis, but that they're getting it through a generic, lift up. Whereas if you're doing really targeted work that's tailored to the population, you would hopefully see more growth. So I'm viewing the metrics, while low, are a floor, and that we hopefully would exceed them, particularly for the students. It's totally unacceptable to have a goal of 30% of the population is, at I can't remember which indicator it is, or 50% of our African American students are meeting the English language arts. I mean, that's just not okay. So I want to go back to why we need to do a look at our English language arts, but even more so a look at our math. That's not just interventions, because the math isn't working for kids. So I really want to reiterate the importance of it being in goal 1 as a solid curriculum and instruction strategy. And how are we going to get those numbers really up?
Great, thank you. We'll come, appreciate having the week to sort of take another look at this, and we can come back with a little bit more information about math and perhaps unpack that just a little bit more deeply for next week.
I'm going to take over for President Alper for a moment until he returns. So Director Babbitt, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you, Director Sinai, for reemphasizing focused and differentiated learning strategies being implemented in our classrooms. And so I'm just hoping that we can set, in the question, do these actions overall support our district vision and goals? I believe that they do overall support, but I believe that if we don't, by like early fall sometime, have another presentation on our accountability plan, our actual measurements, how we're going to, as Director Sinai said, make sure that these differentiated learning strategies are actually reaching our prioritized students, we will fall short of reaching any goal. So I don't know how we can do that, but I'm really hoping that since we don't really have our comprehensive evaluation plan built out, that's something very early in the fall we can come back to and address, because this is the overarching strategic plan of our district. And that has to include implementation and real-time monitoring. Thanks.
I'll call on myself for my question. So Superintendent Stevens, one thing that I wanted to mention is that in your presentation, you mentioned that we were looking at a couple of different things to identify a couple of different students, or to identify groups of students that are in need. And so I wanted to ask a little bit about, if you go back to the social emotional learning and cultural supports page, I wanted to ask about the African American Success Manager.
If you give me just one moment, I know I can find it.
That's okay.
There we are.
Perfect. And so the yellow means that we don't have a place for it to go, or does that mean that we're expanding the position so that we don't, and that's why we don't have a place to go? Can you help me understand that?
I do. It's a great question. It's really the first. It doesn't have a funding source for the coming school year. And that's only sort of a function of, it's really a budgeting function. We have been paying for the African American Success Manager position through our supplemental grant, through the LCAP program. We had to trim that grant by $1 million because of declining student enrollment, unduplicated student enrollment. And so in the coming budget presentation, you'll see that we're proposing to place that position on our general fund. We'd never had any intention of cutting that position. So it's highlighted in yellow just to signal it is coming up in our coming discussion. We do and propose to put it on the general fund to maintain it, but it doesn't represent an expansion of the position. We do have plans to expand Umoja from Longfellow to other campuses. And I understand at this point that it looks like we'll plan for that expansion this coming year, 21-22, with an eye to the expansion taking place in 22-23.
Okay, thank you for responding to that. I think I got my hopes up really high with the thought that we were expanding this position, especially when we look at the data for our most vulnerable students. I thought that would be a great direction for our district to move in. So I'm a little bummed to hear that that's not happening, but interested in how we can address that once again with the remaining funds that we have. If there aren't any more questions, we can now go to the budget presentation that I think will be presented by Assistant Superintendent Pauline Follinsby.
That's right. If you can give it just a few seconds and we'll do the transition.
Okay, thank you. In the meantime, while we're waiting for the transition, I can turn it back over to President Alpert. Do you think we should do the public hearing now?
I was just gonna, that's a great idea. Can we do that public hearing? Thank you for taking over, Vice President Brown. Action item 14.1 is a public hearing for initial proposals for the successor agreement with BCCE. Is there anybody here for public comment on that particular item? Seeing none, do we approve this? Yes. I'm going to move to approve this item. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, thank you, Vice President Brown. Ms. Chires, can you call the roll?
Director Vasquez?
Yes.
Director Babbitt?
Yes.
Director Sinai?
Yes.
Vice President Brown?
Yes.
President Alpert?
Yes. All right, thank you for reminding me to do that, Vice President Brown. Assistant Superintendent Follinsby, Dr. Stevens, are we ready on the budget?
I think we are. Ms. Follinsby, you're feeling okay?
Yeah, I am.
All right.
Thanks.
Here we go.
So I can share my screen, Dr. Steven.
That's great. Thank you very much.
So can everybody see? I'll go into present mode, so it's a little bit bigger.
That would be great.
Trying to get It's always interesting trying to get this on my laptop. Hold on. Move this. I can't get to the button, sorry.
Maybe Dr. Stevens, can you?
Yeah, I can take over.
And then you can just move it along. Move the slides.
Okay, yeah, that's better. Sorry.
No problem.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll be taking us through our budget presentation this evening, and again, we just want to reiterate that this has been a pretty complex budget season. We have a lot of moving parts, a lot of new funding sources. We've also worked extensively with our community, our advisory committee, just to get their input in terms of our planning and decision making. And we have accomplished a lot of our goals. And tonight we hope to take you through the final $750,000 of unrestricted general fund expenditures that we are trying to land the plane, as Dr. Stevens says. So let's go to the next slide. So again, our general fund priorities, we're looking at the remaining general fund revenue. We also will be bringing the superintendent's and staff's ranking of budget priorities. And as mentioned earlier, we met with our SBAC yesterday, so we can also share their ranking. And then we are also looking at the various items and comparing it to PAC and DLAC feedback. We'll have a brief discussion, and we're hoping to bring this back for action on the 16th, the next board meeting. Okay, so on the next slide. So again, $750,000 is the target, if you will, for the unrestricted general fund. And we're actually looking at 4 categories for this $750,000. So we have identified in the list several positions that were formerly staffed by other funding sources. And these positions are actually filled. So we're calling this category existing staffing and mandatory services. And we'll take you through the detail on further slides. But that bucket, if you will, it's $282,000. So when we presented this last night to SBAC, we didn't ask them to vote on this bucket. This is an staffing and services that are mandatory, and we feel that we have to fulfill these obligations. We didn't lay off anybody, and these were basically positions that were formerly staffed by other funding sources. The other bucket that we looked at is our essential bucket, and this has to do with positions that were funded by other sources, and this is just what's being asked for the general fund to absorb, $10,000. And it also, in the following year, it also is looking at ongoing expenses of the $10,000 and additional $110,000. And then we have a desirable category. These are expenses that we would like to have, and we have put them in this category. And then we also have a bucket that we're talking about funding next year, and that's $200,000. And as a reminder, we do still have $2.5 million in COVID funding. We've spent a significant amount, but even after all our proposals, we still have a balance of $2.5 million. And of course, these can be used to fund plans that are still in development, including mental health, tutoring, and expanding family engagement. So with that summary, I'm now going to take us through the detail. So on the next slide, you can see these are the new investments that are existing staffing and mandatory services. So they are new in that we're asking for it to be funded by the general fund, but these are positions that were formerly funded by other sources, as I've said before. So this was mentioned in the LCAP presentation, the African American Success Manager. This is funding the existing position that was formerly funded by LCAP. So we're looking at $153,000. The two BTA positions, these were formerly funded by LCAP and BSEP. So these are 0.5 of each position. And these two, $71,000 and $58,000, that has to do with Heidi's position and a counselor at BTEC. Next slide. We're also looking at the positions that were funded by the low performance block grant. These are various coaching positions and TSA positions that were funded in prior years by a funding source that's now expired, and we're proposing to put it on funding source on a COVID funding source for one additional year, and re-examining these positions in the following year. So those are the three on this slide, and also the others on the other slide. If we can go to the other slide. So these are more positions here, and of course the literacy action plan. This is for continued work on dyslexia related services, and that's $250,000. So that's what we've called a mandatory service. So in looking at this bucket, the total $282,000 ongoing general fund expenditures, and then $527,000 in one-time funding, and that will be our COVID funding. Do we have questions here, or do you want me to continue? So hearing none, I'll continue.
Well, I guess, Vice President Brown, do you have a question?
Oh, I didn't see that. Yeah.
I do have a question, Associate Superintendent Follensby. Are you prepared for us to ask questions just about the structure that you mentioned a little bit ago, or for these specific priorities?
I think we could take questions just on this existing staffing and mandatory services bucket before we go on to the other. Yeah.
Perfect. So my question is around the existing staffing allocations to be put in one-time funding, specifically for staffing. I know in the past we've always been a little nervous about putting staffing positions in one-time funding. So can you kind of speak to the decision around putting it in one-time funding?
Did you want to respond to that, Dr. Stevens?
Sure, I can jump in on this. So this particular half dozen positions or so has been on one-time funding for a number of years. It actually has been a bit helpful for us to have just a handful of positions, some of these sort of low FTE position 0.2, 0.3, 0.4. On revenue sources that have been expiring. It has frankly just allowed us to sort of use up the final pennies of some grants, including the low performing block grant. And so it's sort of had a helpful budget function. The employees themselves don't know the difference between the revenue source. And so because these particular positions have been on one-time funding for a number of years now, we sort of feel a bit more comfortable keeping them there. They're also relatively low FTE. Generally though, Vice President Brown, you're correct. We'd far rather have staff positions on ongoing revenue. It's just that we've sort of found a certain bit of utility in having a small number of them on one time.
Okay. Well, I think my concern is specifically around like the Longfellow literacy coach. Oftentimes, you know, if we put them on one-time funding, what happens and the next time when we don't have the one-time funding to support that, and it isn't housed in a long-term, it doesn't have a long-term home. And that makes me nervous, especially just coming out of a pandemic and all of the learning loss that has happened. It makes me nervous when I don't see that things like this have a full home to go to.
Mm-hmm. We'll take that.
Or ongoing home, rather.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you keep going, Assistant Superintendent Fonsby?
Okay, so thank you for that suggestion, Vice President. So we looked at this other category now. We are looking at a balance of $467,000 in the unrestricted general fund, and we've come just under that target. And this is where we're now looking at staff recommendations for new investments. And this is where we have the category whether we said they were essential or desirable or to be funded next year. So the first one that we're looking at is our bridge program. And you notice that we have a 0 score here for ongoing funding. And it's categorized as essential by both the superintendent and staff and SBAC. And it's also an area of concern for DLAC and PAC, which is why we have those check marks there. What the proposal is that for the first year, it will be funded by our ELO grant, which is a COVID funding that was previously approved by the board. And in the out years, it will be funded by the unrestricted general fund for the equivalent of 1 FTE, which is increasing each staff's FTE by a certain amount to get us to be spending about $110,000, which is 1 FTE, as I mentioned, in the out years. Then we're looking at the communications reorg. This is the general fund share of the communications manager that's predominantly funded by BSEP. And this $10,000 is just a small ask from the general fund for that position's work with the general fund and other areas in the district. And that's been scored as essential both by the superintendent and SBAC. And then it comes to Escape, which is our new enterprise system, which is one-time and ongoing costs for us to convert from our existing system QSS to Escape. We have put some of this funding on one-time general fund and COVID funding with $100,000 going to the general fund. This is the desirable category by superintendent and staff and essential by SBAC. And I just want to point out that both the essential and desirable categories by staff and the superintendent will be can be absorbed by the $750,000. The only area that's we're not thinking of funding is the one where we're scoring it to be funded next year. And then the OFI director, this is creating a new director position. So we're keeping the existing staff, and this would be a new position. It's desirable by the desirable by the superintendent and staff. SBAC, the majority thought it should be funded next year. And of course, this is an area of interest for both the DLAC and PAC. On the next slide. We have the two family liaison, the OFI family liaisons. There are actually 2 FTE. In one, the superintendent and staff thought this was desirable. SBAC thought one was essentials and desirable. There was a split somewhat there. And one was fund next year. We do have an asterisk on one of these positions because we're proposing that we split this position between site and central office, and that this will be Spanish speaking. This information was added after we shared this with SBAC, but we think this is an important distinction to make. So we just thought we would include that information here. And then of course, our one-time community engagement projects, this will be the middle school assignment and the Washington School renaming. That's on one-time funding and desirable both by the superintendent and staff and SBAC. And the EL master plan, this is as a result of the reduction in the LCAP budget. So we're now proposing to fund this $100,000 with one-time funding, desirable by the superintendent and staff, and essential. And of course, an area of interest by DLAC and PAC. And of course, this is a new category, reusable dishware. We're thinking about a pilot program at 2 sites for spending $10,000. I had a discussion with our nutrition services in our one-on-one today. And we're going to be fleshing this out in a little bit more detail, but we're excited to fund $10,000 for this very important project. And I'm thinking about doing a pilot at 2 sites, and it's desirable both by the superintendent and staff and SBAC. So let's go to the next slide. And this is the last page of our recommendations. We only have 2 to go. So this is the area that we thought both the superintendent and staff, well, we thought that these 2 positions, we could think about funding these next year. So for special ed, we've already added significant staffing to the special ed budget for positions that were vacant and funded and vacant that will now be funded for some of the asks for special ed. And the new position for position control in HR, we're thinking about looking at this again in the upcoming year. So that's the 2 funding categories. Those are 2 categories that we thought should be funded next year. SBAC thought the special ed position was a combination of essential and desirable. And the new position, SBAC thought it should be desirable.
And Assistant Superintendent Follinsby, if I can, I might just color in a little bit more what we have been able to accomplish by way of increased staffing in special education department for the coming year. So between revenue from both BERA and found revenue from the general fund, we're adding to the special ed department at right now what is 9.5 FTEs over our current staffing. And it was for that reason, really, that we staff sort of placed this last remaining special education position in the fund next year. Had we not been as successful as we were in identifying additional funding for special ed services, we might think differently about it. But nonetheless, we wanted to represent the difference between our thinking and the rating of SBAC, and so are providing that for you tonight.
Okay, so that's a summary of our proposals. The new investment totaled $667,000, of which we're asking we're thinking of funding this year, the $467,000 and $200,000 will be deferred to next year. One time $230,000 in the general fund, $376,000 for our total ask summarized in that last row. So we can go to the next slide. Again, this is just a recap of what I have presented in terms of the different buckets, the different asks, and the timing of when we're going to be asking to spend some of these investments.
Right. And then just a quick note about process. This evening's presentation is intended just for discussion's sake. We'll work with board leadership between now and next week to think about bringing this similar package of proposals back to the board for action so that they can be presented as part of the final budget.
Okay. Director Babbitt?
Okay.
Oh, she has her hand raised.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Director Babbitt.
Thank you. I just wanted to highlight the unspent balance of COVID one-time funds of $2.5 million. I think that's important for the community to be aware of. And also, can you explain the $120,000 for 22-23? I can't really find what position it's related to.
It's related to the bridge position. So it's the 10,000 that was ongoing from for the BSEP commission position. And then in our multi-year, I'm going to have to pick up the 110,000 for bridge as an ongoing expense. So the 110 plus the 10 for BSEP, that's 120.
Okay, and finally, I just want to suggest that, you know, what we do in many of our school site councils or other organizations is we prioritize carryover, have to make, you know, different priorities. And I guess this is what we're saying with this consider funding next year, that these are already, automatic priorities. But I think that would be maybe a good way to just really highlight and target ahead of time that these priorities, and hopefully that will keep our families from having to come and advocate year after year.
Yeah.
Director Babbitt, if I could, we still don't have an approved budget from the state. There's this sort of typical annual reconciliation process that will happen between now and the end of June. It's just one of the sort of ironies of timing in California that we pass our budget before they do. So there are some discussions about some additional funds coming to districts, including potentially state funding for rate increases in STIRS and PERS contributions. And it may be by the time all is said and done that some additional general fund revenue will show up for us. We'll see if that takes place. In either case, though, we have to pass a balanced budget on this information. And so that's why we're sort of presenting it now, and we may just file those things away. We may get to act on those things actually sooner than we think.
But it is a good, it's an argument for doing some kind of prioritization like Director Babbitt's talking about, so
I
that
think
we
that's
know.
right. Yeah, it's a good idea.
I'm going to jump in and talk about Bridge for a second. Dr. Stevens and Assistant Superintendent Follansby, I appreciate that we've found funds to maintain the status quo, which requires an increase of 1.0 FTE to maintain the status quo with Bridge. And I wanted to ask about a suggestion that I made at the last meeting that would actually allow us to increase the cohorts with Bridge, which is I think a priority of the PAC and also at least a number of us on the board, given the success of that program, sort of demonstrated success of that program with the metrics that they've generated. And I guess I want to echo Vice President Brown's concern about using one-time funds for ongoing positions. I think in general, that's really something we want to avoid. And yet we are sitting on there's the COVID money that Director Babbitt just mentioned, but there's also the LCAP reserve, which is really meant to be used when our supplemental funds are decreasing because of decreasing state funds, whether it's because of our demographics or just reduced funding from the state. And so I guess I want to ask you, Dr. Stevens, if we were going, my understanding is that to increase the cohort of the Bridge program would require, or the request from the director of the Bridge program is for another 1.0 that would go towards a counselor that would be responsible for another cohort of Bridge kids. And if we just, I would feel more comfortable using one-time funds if we could allocate an entire 4 years worth of funds, so that it wasn't a question of, okay, as Vice President Brown was saying, next year, okay, now where are we going to find the money for this priority? If it's on one-time funds, that puts it in jeopardy. It's not great fiscal planning. But if we have a relatively big chunk of money and we can allocate 4 years of it, then we can say, okay, you've got 4 years of funding. You don't have to scramble for it every year. Am I right that would probably eat up almost half of our LCAP reserve?
Yeah.
Superintendent Follansby, is that right?
Yeah.
So I mentioned this at the last meeting. I think it kind of got lost in the shuffle, but I want to throw that out as a possibility to do and see what my colleagues think about it. Dr. Stevens, do you have an opinion on that, or do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I do. You're absolutely correct in describing the Bridge program as successful, and that there's need for 2 cohorts per year. I think it could be doubled, and we have student demand. I myself have been in touch with Jessie Luxford, who directs that program. Her thinking is that an additional 1.0, probably to be filled by a counselor, would permit the expansion, in the first year of an additional cohort, and then for the next 4 years, the cohort in every year thereafter. You've named the challenge correctly. If we sort of begin to use LCAP supplemental funding, we will have built the program without necessarily a path forward. we'll be required to sort of, engage in some deliberations about how to sustain funding for that expanded program, or reduce its size, which I imagine just wouldn't be desirable for us. So I agree completely with the notion that an expansion is appropriate and would benefit students. And then I think we just have to, if we made a decision like that, we'd have to do it with clear eyes. That we have sort of a 4-year road in which we'd have to figure out then what's the replacement funding for that expanded bridge program.
Okay, yeah, and again, like I make the suggestion and think we should do it, but I recognize that that it's problematic. I think the 4 years nature of it, and the fact that the students that it's addressing and serving are really 100% students that we're trying to prioritize with our supplemental funds. So that's my proposal. I know a lot of thought has gone into this budget, and I really appreciate it. And I'll step back and turn over to Director Sinai for her comments.
Thank you, President Alper. I support your concept and your idea, and I actually, I guess where my reservation would be to say that we're going to add a second cohort every year. I think given the circumstances with COVID and the high need, I think we can safely say for year 2021-22, we want to use this funds to add a cohort that gets followed for 4 years. I think it's going to take more financial planning if we say we're just going to double the program in general. So that would be my one caveat. But I definitely would support, and I think it's appropriate. The whole purpose of the LCAP supplemental funds were to deal with, emergency issues with the population that we're trying to serve, and COVID is it. So adding a second cohort, at least for the next 4 years, I totally support it. And thank you for bringing that up. And on that note, I would also like Dr. Stevens, maybe you to clarify with the ESSER funds, a chunk of the 2.2 million, or is that all of the 2.2 million of the COVID dollars that are remaining, that are unaccounted for, unspent? I really support a dedication of funds for mental health services. That has been something that has been prioritized in every single town hall, every single meeting we've had, totally tied to COVID. So, and I don't know what you're thinking of in the sense of scale, but definitely, the $156,000 or whatever we did as ELO or whatever pot that was coming out of is wholly insufficient. So what we can do with those funds for mental health is really important. I want to go to OFI and kind of similar to what I was just saying around Bridge. I think we're in a high priority crisis moment right now where we really need to support our families. And what the proposal does is, and this, I don't think I'm saying anything that we haven't said in previous meetings, is by having a director and a program supervisor and now half of an OFI person that's at the district, we've really only added 1.5 boots on the ground. And I feel like with everything, again, that has been coming forward from the PAC and from the DLAC, and the demands and the needs of our families, is I would like us to have more site-based OFI folks, and would like us to consider a dedication of some of those one-time funds, because they go till 2023, that they don't have to all get spent this year. And we could commit to having a couple of two additional on top of what you're recommending, OFI liaisons working in our schools at this moment in the next 2 or 3 years where our families really need support. So again, I don't know what your thoughts are on that or what my colleagues on the board thought of that, but I feel like we've been saying from the get-go that we need more OFI folks at our school sites, and 1.5 to me doesn't meet that need.
Oh, thanks, Director Simon. Dr. Stevens, do you have a response to the, well, first on what Director Simon said about the mental health funds? I mean, I think you talked about mental health earlier, but is there any response you had to that?
Yeah, we without sort of revealing details that just haven't come to fruition, we are in conversation with a number of organizations about trying to get to what our goal of having one full-time counselor on each of our sites for at least the 1 year period coming up. We think we may have a partner who's got that kind of capacity. Approximate cost of that work would be about $500,000 for the year. So we just haven't sort of signed on the dotted line yet. We're sort of doing our due diligence on that proposal, comparing it to some others. But we are sort of actively in this discussion, and I think not far from being able to identify that partner. So please know that we are working on that. We've heard that loud and clear. And then in terms of the OFI proposal, I feel sort of similarly as the bridge proposal. There's just undoubtedly the need right now. We hear it from our advisory committees. We hear it from our families. I think the sort of question from a policy perspective is, does it make sense for a couple years on one-time funding? And, are we collectively as a governance team sort of willing to have the conversation in a couple years about what will happen when that funding eclipses? So it's sort of a matter of making the decision with clear eyes about what will be good about it in the short term and hard about it in the long term.
Okay. Director Vasudev.
Thank you, President Alpert. I just wanted to also support both the ideas of expanding the bridge program because of just the amount of COVID-19 related challenges that our most vulnerable students have faced this year. I think that program serves our target population. It's really important that we continue to support our students. Also, at the idea of expanding mental health right now is really important to take K-12, and so I'd love to just once you get more ideas, Dr. Stevens, from other, from the providers that you're in contact with of what that would cost, I'd love to just hear more details and how we can do that. With regards to OFI, I just wanted to echo what Director Sinai said. I think it's really important that we think of how to get more boots on the ground. This could be a good time for us to try to, pilot a middle school program. I know that we've been talking about that for years, like expanding OFI into the middle schools and what that would look like to expand into all the middle schools. So it could be really an exciting time to help our families, particularly as they're coming back and need additional support in the upcoming school year. I think it's an opportunity to really do some great work at the middle school level with family engagement. So I support expanding OFI and getting more boots on the ground. I just wanted to clarify, though, that for that split position, the Spanish language position, that it is providing that at the district level, it's not like they're managing people. They're providing direct services to families, to Spanish monolingual families, right? And we know from our own district census that 11% of our families identify Spanish as their primary home language, and so that's a lot. It's a lot of people. And it's making sure that, where there are OFI staff members, that where there is a gap in language, that we're able to fill it. And so it is providing direct services. It's not like that person is just, managing folks. It's providing direct services to a vulnerable population. And by splitting the position, you're also adding more boots on the ground because they're able to serve an additional site. And so I think this could be a good opportunity for us to expand OFI at the middle school level.
Okay. Director Babbitt.
So I'm a little unclear on what we're asking. Are you all asking if we as a board want to support Julie and Ty's proposal, which is not, which is what I'm seeing is not in the superintendent's proposal, or do you want to get our thoughts, our feedback on that, or what is the direction needed?
Yeah, thank you, Director Babbitt. So yes, I mean, so my overall comments is I'm comfortable with the superintendent's recommendation, and I'm proposing an additional expenditure out of the LCAP supplemental fund for an additional cohort of bridge. And I'd like to get the rest of the board's thoughts on that particular proposal. Director Sinai's made a proposal, if I understand it, of 2 additional FTE of OFI staff liaisons also out of one-time funds, different one-time funds than the bridge, what I'm talking about for bridge. It would be helpful to get the board's views on those. As a process point, I think if, for example, a majority of the board was in favor of one or both of those proposals, the direction would be to Assistant Superintendent Follansby and Dr. Stevens to incorporate those additional expenses into the version of the budget that is brought to us next week. Is that, I mean, as a process point, is that right, Dr. Stevens?
That sounds right to me, yes.
And then, so that's just two proposals that have come up. Of course, if anyone has thoughts or comments about the rest of the budget presentation, you know, now's the time to say, now's the time to raise them. But Director Babbitt, do you have, while we're talking, do you have a response to those 2 proposals?
I'm in support of both those proposals. I just hope that we can clearly make sure that the Parent Advisory Committee understands that this is coming from the LCAP reserve. And if there is another besides the reserve that we could be considering, I'm also open to hearing that as well, because we know that our unduplicated count is continuing to go down. And so we will need to somehow make up for what's already in there with a reduced population in the future.
Yeah, can I, oh, sorry. 2 things. One is, to me, it seems like these might be priorities that would, in the category that you were talking about earlier, Director Babbitt, where if additional ongoing funds become available, you know, I would love for staff to find, to use them for these, so that we're not using one-time funds, or not, what's the opposite of replenishing, depleting our LCAP reserve. But I guess I just had a quick question, Assistant Superintendent Follansby. Am I right that, you know, the LCAP reserve is capped at $1 million, right? My understanding is that we always have a little bit of carryover in LCAP in our supplemental funds because we don't spend it all for different personnel related reasons. So is that true that we can actually expect, even with our numbers going down, that reserve, if past practice is any, you know, guide, might continue to be replenished over the next couple of years?
I don't think so, just because of the fact that we've had to find funding for almost $1 million to balance that fund. So I think the LCAP is pretty maxed out at this point.
Okay.
And so I don't think we'll have an extra reserve, if you will, to kind of backfill these positions.
Well, that was wishful thinking then, but it amplifies what Director Babbitt was saying about making sure that PAC knows that that's what we're talking about, and that I guess the amendment to my direction would be to try to avoid using those funds if we could. Even though it is what we should, it's the population we should be spending those funds on, but the ongoing nature of it is not what that one-time reserve is really for. Is that fair, Director Babbitt? Okay. Vice President Brown.
I was actually going to say that Associate Superintendent Follansby reminded us a while ago about our LCAP reserves, in a question that I asked months ago. And so I'm glad to hear that we were able to sound out or potentially not using our LCAP reserve for that reason, and for the reason that Director Babbitt highlighted in regards to our decline in enrollment numbers, and knowing that our funding may be different next year and in the years to come. So the kind of caution us from using those funds. However, I do support the recommendation for ongoing support for Bridge, as well as the direct recommendation that Director Sinai presented in regards to getting more boots on the ground for OFU liaisons. I think that that's just something that the superintendent and the board partner with the superintendent very early in this year to highlight as a priority. Families have advocated for that over and over again, while still understanding the need to have support on on the district level and still needing the support to ensure that, let us not get confused, that on the district level, the boots are still on the ground. So we must, continue to keep that in mind, but also the need for more liaisons. So I support the recommendations that have been mentioned.
We need to get boots that are branded with the OFED logo. We can use.
Well, it's not in the budget, so I don't know.
That's a perfect use of one-time funds. Boots on the ground. All right, Director Sinai.
I like that idea. I was just gonna say maybe in relation to the recommendation or the direction to Assistant Superintendent Folonsby and Dr. Stevens is that, what we're saying is that we're encouraging the youth. Encouraging may not be the right word. We are open and would like to see the use of one-time funds going toward an additional cohort of Bridge and 2 additional OFE. And if there's, whether it comes from ESSER, whether it comes from, part of the LCAP reserve, ESSER, 2.2 million goes fast, but, we haven't spent it yet. And it could be that 1 or 2 years of Bridge comes out of ESSER and, 1 or 2 years comes out of LCAP. So, I mean, we could defer to you guys to play with how to do it with the understanding that we're trying not to deplete the LCAP reserve.
And if I can piggyback on what Director Sinai has said, it makes me a little nervous because this evening, we've talked about 3 or 4 things that'll come out of that $2 million leftover money that we'll have left over. And I want us to be realistic about what we can fund and how we can fund it, and would encourage you to accurately find ways to spend that money.
Yeah, I can feel Assistant Superintendent Fonsley's blood pressure rising as we're spending this one-time money. I mean, I think you're right, Vice President Brown. It's because there's also the mental health that we just talked about. It sounds like, Dr. Stevens, a big chunk of that money is really earmarked for mental health services.
Those services.
$500,000, I think you said, Superintendent Stevens.
That's a current quote. I mean, these are sort of trained mental health professionals, and so we're talking about paying folks, for their time, and that adds up quickly.
Yeah. Director Babbitt and then Director Vasudev.
Sorry, that was actually my comment about those ESSER funds and how we've already talked about.
Yeah.
And for other reasons and needs. So.
Yeah, we got to be cautious. Director Vasudev.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that when we're talking about mental health services, that we're talking about comprehensive services for like elementary, middle, and high, that we're looking at those 3 different age groups. And are we looking at community mental health or clinical? Like, any idea, Dr. Stevens? Any more?
A mix, actually, yes. So in the conversations we've been having, we're talking both about sort of proactive sort of mental health education, often delivered through teachers who have been trained by a provider, as well as providing group support and individual support on campus. So it's been sort of like a mixed method approach to being able to provide mental health supports for students.
Got it. And do you know if, like, within that mixed group, like, kind of what's the recommended priority to, like, what are you hearing from other districts that they're thinking of doing for next year to help their students overcome?
Yeah, I'm hearing districts doing a whole variety of things, including some districts turning to, the relatively untested sort of new field of online sort of, commercial sort of counseling provision. There are companies now out there sort of offering app-based and sort of, platform-based mental health services for students. But we haven't really vetted those companies yet. We've been more looking at partners we're familiar with who have reputations here in the Bay Area as being able to provide counseling services. But some more valuing the sort of in-person on-campus support versus the online platform.
Yeah, I agree. That was what I was going to say is, can we prioritize what's, in person for our students as we plan for as normal of a return as we can for the fall.
All right. Is there any last direction folks want to give? Dr. Stevens, Assistant Superintendent Fonsby, did you get what you needed from us?
We believe so. This has been a really helpful discussion. So our plan as a next step will be in touch with board leadership over the course of this week, but we'll put together a package much like this one, but with some modifications. Would propose to bring it for approval at the coming board meeting. And we'll also be holding the sort of first reading of the general fund budget next week. We will incorporate these sort of elements into that. By the time we get to the 23rd, you could expect to see the general fund elements of tonight's discussion incorporated into that presentation and to request for approval.
Great. I see Director Sinai, and I just want to say to the public, if you want to speak in our extended public comment, now is the time to raise your hand. Oh, and Director Babbitt too. Okay, Director Sinai.
I just wanted to put in a request, Dr. Stevens, that when you meet with the PAC chairs, that you try to encourage them to get a PAC meeting before the 16th. My understanding is the meeting might be set for after the 16th, which is too late. So if you could get it, because we really want their feedback as part of this process.
That's my thinking, and I'm going to make that request of the chairs when I see them tomorrow.
And Director Babbitt.
I just wanted to ask, and maybe one of my board colleagues can help me understand how we as a board can advocate for increased funding to come from the state level. We really just need increased funding to meet our general fund needs. And I don't know how to do that, but I'm definitely on board to work at advocating in that way. So thank you.
That's a great question that we should talk about and including with our local representatives in the Assembly and the Senate, who are friends to the district and might be able to give us constructive advice about that. Thank you for raising that. Okay. All right, great. Thank you all so much. We're going to move to extended public comment. Vice President Brown, if you could set the timer for 2 minutes each, and we have 6 people who've raised their hands. So this is the time. I'm going to give you one last chance to raise your hand. Okay, we've got Sarah Bowles, Liza. Okay, we got now. This is no more people after right now. Sarah Bowles, Liza Lutzker, Stephanie Green, Berkeley High School PTSA, Lindsay Nofelt, Lily Howell, and Sei Sung Woo. We'll start with Ms. Bowles. Oh, Ms. Chires, are you with us?
Yes, President Malcolm.
Okay, thank you. Just checking. Go ahead, Ms. Bowles.
Hey, you didn't actually say whether we had a minute or 2 minutes.
Sorry, 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Okay. So yeah, after listening to the LCAP plan and seeing very little targeted support for special education, one thing's pretty clear to me: the district and the board aren't really asking questions about specific needs within special education. It's just kind of this amorphous SPED category. So with the exception of new support for dyslexia, which is awesome, I'm not seeing special education LCAP program goals being driven by the specific disabilities. And I think it's important to understand in BUSD, according to the state data that you've submitted, of like 1,156 SPED kids, you've got 207 with autism, 147 with speech or language impairments, 441 with specific learning disabilities like dyslexia or math learning challenges, and 243 that are classified as other health impairment. Only 11 are actually classified as having an intellectual disability. So you need to be tracking outcomes for kids in special education by their specific learning challenges and the identified program supports for those kids, which are going to be highly specialized. So as a parent, it's really opaque. And I want to be benchmarking my kid against progress by the specific challenge, not general, special education as a goal. So yeah, when I see that your goals are taking kids from say, 23% to 30%, it just seems way too low, because for the vast majority of these kids, we're talking about accommodations to access education, not that they're fundamentally incapable. And I think you just need to do a reset on how you communicate these program specifics.
Thank you. Thank you. That was exactly 2 minutes. Liza Lutzker, followed by Stephanie Green. Ms. Lutzker, we can't hear you. You're not muted, but I don't know. Is it your, sometimes your AirPods or earphones or? No, we'll come back. We'll try you again in a minute. Let's go to you, Stephanie Green.
Hi, I'd like to say it's been so nice all year seeing you in my living room. I hope this continues next year on Zoom. Thank you so much for such a productive discussion about LCAP and also the potential use of the $2.2 or $2.5 million. I'd like to advocate again for the use of those funds for the OFI positions, but also to ask you all to think strategically about that as well. So always already there's been a need for an expansion of the OFI positions, but we're in a particular time, and to think about the expenditure of those funds in this time of emerging from the stage of the pandemic is important to realize that the unemployment assistance is going to be ending in September. The moratorium on rents is ending in June. Landlords can take people to court beginning in August, and all of this is going to create incredible instability for families and for students, which is highly related as well to mental health. So to be thinking about mental health and OFI together, I think is important, as well as to think about a lot of the situations, a lot of the problems being consistent amongst the schools. So I'd like to bring an idea that my friend and sister Brazil McIntyre, who directs the LEARNS program over at Sylvia Mendez, has proposed, and that is to think about how could you have not only have boots on the ground, site-specific staff, but also people who are specialized in certain areas who could be resources across the district. Maybe there's a specialist in housing, a specialist of food, a specialist in these common areas that could be called down even across the sites. So thank you so much. You all are doing a super job, and I feel so blessed that you all are there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Ms. Lutzker, you think you figured it out? No, we'll keep trying. We'll come back to you. You've got about 6 minutes to figure it out. Ms. Howell, Lily Howell, we'll go to you next.
You can hear me?
Yeah, we've got you, Lily. Go ahead.
Okay. My name is Lily Howell. I'm a family engagement specialist, and I just wanted to thank you all for your robust discussion and appreciation for the work of OFI. It was not long ago that the district actually considered cuts to our department, and it's overwhelming to hear the current district and community understanding and appreciation for our work. My colleagues and I do this work because we care, because it matters, because we want to see our Black and Brown students and families seen, heard, valued, included, welcomed, and successful. A centralized parent engagement specialist who is bilingual in Spanish is much needed and will serve our students and families in a meaningful way. And while I appreciate the move of creating an OFI director, as it elevates the respect and shared commitment to equity and family engagement in our district, I would like to ask for meaningful expansion that will do more to change the day-to-day experiences for our students and families, or boots on the ground. And I would totally wear those boots, by the way, Mr. Alper, if you get them. Well, it will give our department leadership much needed time to dedicated to outlining strategic plans and designing measurable goals and outcomes, having a director. It will not change our capacity to do so without meaningful expansion. You heard from families and stakeholders that they wanted to see one full-time OFI for school, that they want to see meaningful family engagement. In our work, we help families with the complexity of navigating each school's unique culture and systems. Being split, we have to navigate 2 cultures, 2 climates, 2 different systems, and do not have the time to shift from supporting our parents with crisis navigation to meaningful engagement. Right now, we are serving families who continue to be in crisis and are traumatized by the very real consequences of living within a white supremacist society that have been much compounded by the pandemic. In order to pivot from crisis case management of these families to a meaningful family engagement model, we encourage you to continue the discussion you started tonight to commit to positions that serve students and families at the school sites. I understand the various demands that need to be balanced in this budget. This was a really robust conversation, and I empathize with the complexity of making these decisions and appreciate you for continuing the conversation. I can't see my screen. I'm so sorry.
Your time's up, but thank you so much, Ms. Howell.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it. Thanks for all you do. Berkeley High PTSA, that could either be Sandra Loving, it could be Mimi Pulich. We'll just have to find out. Whoever it is muted.
Hi, can you hear me now?
There you go. Yep.
Hi. So this is Mimi Pulich, and it was 4 years ago that I first spoke about math at Berkeley High to the board. And at that time, I said that I was just digging into it, and it was like Pandora's box, that the more you look at it, the more you discover. And so this is one of the last board meetings I'll be speaking on behalf of Berkeley High but I have been invested in math for 4 years now. And what I want to tell you is that, in my opinion, a math task force, it might be able to uncover the issues in our elementary schools, which I believe are the root of the problems that we ultimately see at Berkeley High, but I don't see it being able to scratch the surface of the complexity of the issues at Berkeley High. And bearing this in mind, and the fact that I had thought about this, I have written something called The Big Picture of Math at Berkeley High. It's on the Berkeley High website. And if you were to print it, it would probably be about 15 pages. I don't know, it's long, relatively exhaustive. And I have held respect for our teachers in mind in the process of writing it, although some might not like everything that's said. But I think that when it comes to our prioritized students, there are many strikes against their being successful at Berkeley High. And I think it has as much to do with how integrated math is being taught as it does with anything else. So when you're ready for a long read, I'll send you all the link. And that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Pulich. Thank you so much. All right, Lindsay. Oh, Ms. Lutzker, we'll tell you at the very end. Lindsay Nofelt, you're next.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. My name is Lindsay Nofelt. I'm a parent at Cragmont Elementary. I first want to thank you for the much improved deck reviewing the LCAP. I really appreciate helping us track programs back to goals. Data drives goals, which drives programs and services. That's how I love to see it. So I really appreciate that hard work to make that happen. I have a list of nitpicky things that I'd just like to really quickly review. I would love to see one tracker. The board asked for a single spreadsheet that might be unwieldy and long, but tracks all the funds in one single place. And I still think that that is necessary. It's essential. We need to be able to dig through that and understand what's happening. For example, we claim that $2.5 million of the COVID funds is unspent, but the budget proposal tonight used $900K, and we're saying another $500K for mental health. So that's almost all gone already. Before we said we were deficit funding COVID funds. So let's be transparent about where everything's happening, where everything's going. As a public attendee of SBAC meetings, I witnessed 7 people voting. So when we take into the consideration the input of all of our advisory committees, including SBAC, let's be clear about, are we having a quorum or not? 7 people out of 17 voting members does not an opinion make, in my opinion. You'll want to check your presentation for the LCAP plan because some of your desired outcomes are lower than current achievement rates.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Se-Sang Wu.
Hi, my name is Se-Sang Wu. I'm a father of a rising 3rd grader and a rising kindergartner at Washington Elementary. And I wanted also to thank you for the presentation. This is actually the first time I've actually started to learn about the LCAP. And so I found the presentation extremely accessible and really understandable for a real first-timer newbie. So kudos to the staff who put that together. Thank you very much. I just wrote some comments, and I think I just kind of speak them really quickly. Because of the time limit here. So I just want to, first of all, I just wanted to say I agree with Director Saine's point that we should set higher goals for academic performance of our lowest performing students. Perhaps the board could consider stretch goals that would be publicized. The problem with modest goals is that it signals a diminished sense of urgency with which the board regards students' shortfalls for college readiness or overall school engagement. To the teachers who are actually doing this work, to the community, to the students themselves. So that's just one point. I was going to mention really quickly that as a child of Chinese immigrants, I had trouble with school at one point, and all these teachers came out of the woodwork to make sure that I was okay. And I hate to say this, but if I were Black, I don't think I would have had nearly the same resources. And this was in Florida in the 1970s in an integrated school. Director Saine also makes the important point that in showing how these various investments are targeted to those students to the greatest need, that we need to show that. So if we've identified a number of students who, for whatever reason in their situation in society, are not meeting their goals that have been established universally for all of our students, we should be clear about what investments we're making for them in particular, not just a broadly defined program such as, more literacy coaches or this program or that program, but specifically for these students, what are they getting? Quickly, Director Babbitt's point that teachers should have in feedback into metrics. I agree with that. I think that's a good point. Also, I'm also concerned about how you will deliver culturally competent training to these teachers, making sure that it's effective. And my time's up. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for, you left, but he's taking over as the president of the Berkeley PTA Council, right? All right, yes. So thank you for that service. Ms. Lutzker, we'll try you one more time.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I changed devices, so.
Success.
Okay, so good evening, school board members and superintendent. I'm Liza Lutzker. I'm the parent of a rising 4th grader at Sylvia Mendez and a rising 6th grader at Longfellow. Hard to keep track. So I'm here again this week to talk to you about the issue of large class sizes at Sylvia Mendez and possibly at other 4th grades across the district, which is kind of directly not in line with the BSEP funding that was passed in 2016. Last week, I was joined by a number of Sylvia Mendez parents who discussed the concerns that they have around their children who have IEPs with large class sizes. I know that some of you have heard from teachers. And tonight I've heard a number of recurring themes, one of which is mental health, student support, concerns around declining enrollment, and also concerns for like ongoing funds and continued support. And I actually think that this is an opportunity for you all to improve all of those. So we know that smaller class sizes increases, improves mental health, increases actual student support. And I know that there's a concern for declining enrollment, but this is actually something critical that you all need to address. As you heard, there are parents who are considering leaving the district because of this huge jump in class sizes. And also, there's a concern for ongoing funds, and this really does fly directly in the face of what voters approved for BSEP funding. BSEP funding is actually separate from the COVID funds. It's separate from the LCAP funds. It's not what you are discussing tonight. And the specific intended purpose of these funds is to have smaller class sizes starting this year. And I'm not really sure where those funds are going right now, but I really, really encourage you to put those funds where they're needed now before the quality teachers run out. It's time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your patience and for sticking with us all night. Really appreciate it. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Have a good night. Thanks, Pauline, Brent, everybody. Take care. Have a good night.